Do some pro basketball today as Nico Harrison has lost his job. The clock was ticking the moment he elected to go rogue and trade a generational superstar in his mid-20s. So we'll get to kind of the latest storylines in the NBA. The Utah Jazz have lost 6 of 7 games now, and part of the plan, part of the deal. But we did see a couple of snapshot moments from young Ace Bailey last night. They were very, very exciting. Do a little Jazz on the show. The Monday Night Football game, Porter, was not a good game. I don't want to hear it, okay? I don't want to hear anything about it. It was a boring football game. It's not about defense. It's not about physicality. It's about ineptitude. And just like last Thursday between the Broncos and the Raiders was dog you-know-what, Packers, Eagles last night could not have been more boring, and I don't want to hear anything about it.
Do you know what someone who grew up cheering for Frank Beamer and Kyle Whittingham teams has to do to himself?
All right.
I understand. I will say there's a little bit to it, right? Like I don't necessarily enjoy the theatrics of a 3-0 game in the mud. But I do enjoy when it is good defense, right? When it is like just legitimately a good front seven dominating a football game. Sometimes that ends in a game with not many highlights for Sports Center, but I don't necessarily enjoy that game any less. Although I do like poking at you a bit on the subject.
Oh, it was so boring. And the primetime games this weekend, they were boring games. There's no way around it. Started on Thursday with that eyesore between the Raiders and the Broncos. And then kind of throughout the course of the weekend, the Chargers-Steelers game wasn't great. Aaron Rodgers, that's as bad as he's looked probably ever. And then we got Eagles-Packers 10-7. Ugh. I cannot decide if the Packers are good or not, but we will talk some pro football. Week 11, believe it or not, gets going on Thursday night with the hapless New York Football Jets taking on the red-hot New England Patriots under Mike Vrabel. Man, they've had a good year. So we'll get to some NFL stuff. Brian Daboll has been fired. Travis Hunter, sadly, is out for the rest of the season. A lot of injury news, unfortunately. That's kind of part of the deal when it comes to pro football. It is a big day / night in the world of college football. Where will the CFP rankings have Utah tonight? Where will they have BYU? Where will they have Texas Tech? Texas Tech in the AP moved up just a bit, one spot as a result of beating BYU handily at home. They're number 8. BYU fell 4 spots to number 12. Utah moved up to number 15, even though they were idle. And as we talked about, the advanced metrics tell us Utah is the best 2-loss team in the country. Now, that's kind of like being a bridesmaid, never the bride. Nobody gives a rip. If you've lost 2 games, you're unfortunately in a spot where you still need help, but so much on the table left for the Utes and so much to play for the Cougars. If you are a college football fan and you make it to mid-November with hope, you're doing something right. There are so many P4 programs that would just kill for like 7 or 8 wins every single year. And there's a chance both BYU and Utah get to double-digit wins, and there's a chance tonight they're right next to each other in the CFP projections as far as the playoffs go. I could see BYU being at 12 and Utah at 13. Head-to-head matters. It just does, okay? Maybe I'm old school that way. But I don't foresee Utah being ranked ahead of BYU tonight, but we'll see because the College Football Committee utilizes those advanced rankings that value Utah not just a little bit more than BYU, but quite a bit more than BYU. So the CFP rankings will be released tonight. Big night in college football. It is, of course, a game week for the Utes. They're back at it in Waco against the Baylor Bears. 9.5-point favorite. Utah State continues their quest for a bowl. They need another win. They're going to be at UNLV coming up this weekend, and BYU welcomes in a sneaky TCU team. BYU a 5.5-point favorite. So we'll get you ready for the college football weekend ahead. Of course, one eye on the weekend always on Utah, on BYU, on the Big 12. So we'll get you ready for the college football weekend ahead in addition to that. So a lot to do, busy show. Thanks for making us a part of your Tuesday afternoon. First guest, voice of the Utes, Bill Riley. He will stop by. We will talk a little bye-week action for the Utes. We'll look ahead to Baylor, and we'll talk big picture Utah football. Sneak in a little Utah hoops as the Utah men's basketball team under Alex Jensen has started the season 3-0. So we'll get Ryle's take on what we're seeing early on from the Utes. We will have some Utah women's basketball on the station tonight. They are taking on UVU. That will come your way after the Kyle Whittingham Coaches Show. We'll say goodnight at 6. Then it's time for the Coach Whit Coaches Show. Bill will host that for you. And then after that, we're going to send you over Utah women's basketball against UVU. The men got another win last night, 87-69 over a Holy Cross team that probably would like to leave the state of Utah after getting their heads kicked in by both Utah and BYU. Terrence Brown, 21 points. He's off to a good start to the season for Alex Jensen's club. After Riles stops by, it's the TV voice of the Utah Jazz, Craig Bolerjack. We have 2 3-time Utah Broadcasters of the Year back-to-back. How about that? Bill Riley, Craig Bolerjack combined 6 times, winning Utah Broadcaster of the Year. We'll bring in Andy Larson from the Salt Lake Tribune today. And then we're going to catch up with our friends from the Fierce Fighting Championships. They're in action coming up this weekend at the Masonic Temple, where you can go, I don't know, watch guys punch each other and then look at ancient things. Like, I don't know. What have you ever?
Kind of seems like a dope venue for specifically this, right?
Have you ever been inside a Masonic Temple?
That one.
Have you really?
Every week.
Were you allowed to go in, or did you break in just to cause some issues?
No, I went on an off day just to check it out. I'm a big fan of old buildings and architecture. Not uncommon, but so yeah, I've been to the one in Salt Lake, and should be a super cool venue for this. Just the way it there's a bowl kind of. You'll be looking right down onto the cage. So we'll get the preview there.
I could see you dabbling in Freemasonry in your free time. I could see you just dabbling, just kind of learning about it, seeing what it's about. You wouldn't be the first.
No, not in my family line either.
Okay, all right. We'll learn more about Porter's genealogy later in the show as we get familiar with our friends of the Fierce Fighting Championships. And then Lindsey Rhodes, fast becoming one of our favorites to talk pro football, would be our final guest in the 4 o'clock hour before we launch into the 5. So Bill Riley, Craig Bolerjack, Andy Larson, Lindsey Rhodes, me, Spence Checketts, and you've already heard from that young man, Porter Larson, on a Tuesday afternoon. All right, I'm going to give you my best guess. I think BYU lands at 12 tonight, and I think Utah lands at 13. I think the CFP committee has already told us they value Utah more than the AP, but I don't think they're going to put the Utes ahead of BYU simply because of head-to-head, which it has to matter, man. It just does.
Well, and there's not a whole lot. There's shakeups to be had, possibly. Notre Dame plays Pitt. There's some SEC matchups. There's some Big Ten matchups still to be had. With the teams above Utah and BYU. But the reality is Utah was ranked 13 last Tuesday. They haven't played a game since, and there hasn't been anything dramatic ahead of them outside of a BYU loss, which the head-to-head maybe nullifies that out, depending on what the committee thinks. I do not believe that Utah should be above BYU in this ranking, and I feel like the committee will tell us essentially what they told us last week, is that Utah right now is right on the outside looking in. Not the worst place to be, considering that you have 2 disappointing losses and you still have potential of appearing in a Big 12 title game.
As I referenced, if you are a college football fan and you reach mid-November with a lot to hope for and cheer for, you're in a really good spot, and I think that's applicable for both Utah and BYU. All right, we'll get Ryle's take on this. Bill Riley will join us right out of the gates on a Tuesday. But before we catch up with Bill, courtesy of our good friends, your good friends too at Prize Picks, it's time now for your opening tip.
Welcome to The Drive with Spence Checketts on Utah's #1 sports talk. Now into the studios of ESPN 700 to set the scene for the show. The opening tip of The Drive is brought to you by Prize Picks. Use the code ESPN 700 and run your game with Prize Picks.
You guys already know Prize Picks is the best place to win cash on football, whether it's the Niners or the Broncos or the Raiders. Well, basketball is here. Basketball is back. It's the best place to win cash on hoops as well. Jazz, Warriors, Lakers, Knicks, whoever your favorite team is, Prize Picks offers stacks. Won a little cash on Lauri Markkanen's stack last night. You can pick more on Lauri Markkanen's points, rebounds, and assists, stuff like that. You can pick all of them in the same lineup only on Prize Picks. You can also follow other Prize Picks players directly on the app. Copy their lineups in one click. Whether it's a friend, a celebrity partner, or just someone whose picks you like, hit the follow button and check out every lineup they create in the new feed tab on Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700 to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Promo code ESPN700 to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup, because on Prize Picks, you guys already know it's good to be right. All right after we say goodnight, we're going to rush home in time for the second iteration of the college football playoff rankings, which moving forward are the only rankings that matter. Okay, so as we were just kind of talking, when it comes to some of the results that took place last week, not a ton of action ahead of either BYU or Utah. Oregon nearly got, but they were able to escape, and that's a big win for them. Of course, BYU's loss will change the way they're viewed by the committee. They didn't just lose, they got smoked. It was the one thing that they had to avoid. The line was 10.5, and Texas Tech doubled the line. That will affect the way the college football playoff committee views BYU. How much? We'll have to wait and see. They fall 4 spots in the AP to 12. Indiana barely escaped Penn State. They needed a Heisman moment from their quarterback, Francisco Mendoza, who looks like he might even win the thing. But Penn State, even though they're 3-6 and 0-6 in the Big Ten, they started the season ranked as one of the top 2 or 3 teams in the country and the Vegas favorite to win the Big Ten. Will the CFP committee take that into consideration as it pertains to Indiana having to sweat out that game? Now, it was on the road. And that place is, if you've never been to Beaver Stadium, if you've never been to where Penn State plays football, I've only been once. BYU played them, I think, in 92, and we made the drive up there from our home in Connecticut, and I was blown away at that atmosphere. That's still a tough place to play, and a roster with maybe 7 or 8 NFL guys. So what will they do with Indiana? My guess is they leave them at 2 as they continue to be undefeated, both overall and the Big 12. Texas A&M smoked Mizzou. Mizzou's quarterback is out for the year. So do they look at that in any adverse way? I doubt it. I referenced Oregon barely escaping Iowa. That would have benefited Utah and maybe even BYU, but Iowa is a top 20 team, and Oregon badly needed that win on the road. Okay, so Wake Forest beat Virginia, but they're 14. That's really not germane to this conversation. Most of the other results I do not think will affect the way that they view either BYU or Utah. So what are we expecting tonight? The projections, according to the roundtable on ESPN.com, as far as what they think is going to happen tonight, no surprise at the top. Ohio State at 1. It's Indiana at 2. It's Texas A&M at 3. All 3 of those teams continue to be undefeated, both overall, of course, and in conference. They've got Bama at 4 because they took care of LSU. Georgia at 5 at 8-1. Ole Miss at 6. Texas Tech up a spot to 7. And then they go Oregon at 8, and that's just where they were last week. So no improvement, but they don't fall. Notre Dame up 1 spot to 9. They're expecting Texas to remain there at 10. Oklahoma at 11. And then at 12, they have the BYU Cougars. Now, remember, this is a 12-team CFP, obviously. So my best guess is BYU will land there at 12, but I think we are going to see the University of Utah come in at number 13 tonight. That is my best guess. No idea if that's what we're going to see, but if I had to give you my best guess, that's what I'm kind of leaning into, because last week, even though Utah was at 17 in the AP, they bumped them up to 14 in the CFP, if I remember correctly, right? And so Utah is able to move up, even though they were idle, to number 15 in the AP, and my guess is they're going to – Utah at 13, last week, in the first iteration of the CFP, up 4 spots from their AP ranking of 17. So Utah moves up a couple of spots in the AP. But the question is, ultimately, is there any way that the CFP changes the way they view Utah, even though it was a bye week? And my guess would be no. I mean, all of these metrics, as we continue to talk about, and by the way, this includes Notre Dame, Texas, and Oklahoma, who all have 2 losses. The S&P Plus and the FPI are telling us Utah is the best 2-loss team in the country. Now, you don't get an award for that. You don't hang a banner for that. But that's going to be my guess, as opposed to what we saw last week, that BYU does stay in the top 12, but Utah stays there at 13. I don't see any reason to move them down. But I, again, do not believe the CFP will move them up simply because of the head-to-head. However, if the CFP does value these rankings that we continue to talk about, even more so than either head-to-head or overall record, I cannot even imagine the persecution complex coming from our brethren about 40 miles down south if somehow, some way, the CFP committee has the nerve to move Utah up to 12 and BYU down to 13. The up-to-date S&P Plus right now is Utah at 7. They love Texas Tech. Texas Tech at 4, Utah at 7, and BYU, as a result of their loss, all the way down to 22 in the nation, even though they only have one loss. If we move over to the FPI, the Football Power Index, Utah at 9, Texas Tech is up to 11, and BYU at 17. And the committee is telling us they're using these metrics, okay? Again, I'm old school. I do believe head-to-head matters. I would be stunned if they had the nerve to put Utah at 12 and BYU at 13. But that is my guess tonight. I think BYU 12, Utah 13, with both teams in the mix and very much alive for a lot of really exciting things. And as a college football fan, that's really all you can ask for. Make it to mid-November with hope very much still alive. We'll catch our first break of this Tuesday show, and we'll get Bill's thoughts on this, the voice of the Utes. Bill Riley joins us coming up on the other side of a quick break right here on ESPN 700.
Obamate Abbey outside. Don McHenry inside. Josh Hayes finishes through contact and an and one opportunity. Great find from McHenry and a good patient move again by Josh Hayes, who had.
We will have the Kyle Whittingham Coaches Show for you tonight when we say goodnight at 6 o'clock. Following that, it's time for a little Utah Women's Hoops taking on UVU. The host of the Kyle Whittingham Coaches Show and the voice of the Utes is our guest on a Tuesday afternoon. You know him as Bill Riley. Hello, Riles. How are you, sir?
Hello, Spence. I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm good. Any exciting bye week stories? Did you do anything fun to kind of get away for a minute? How did the voice spend the bye week?
I had a basketball game on Saturday. Had to call that overtime thriller with Weber State. So not a lot of downtime. Watched a little football and no real downtime with the cross pollination of our seasons going on right now.
Fair enough. And I do want to talk some hoops. We'll get there in a moment, but let's start with some football. And, you know, all week, Bill, and we had you on last week, the one thing BYU just had to avoid was the one thing that happened, and that is getting smoked by Texas Tech. The line was 10.5, which kind of raised my eyebrows a little bit, and Tech just didn't cover. They doubled the line. And BYU had a chance to really shut everybody up, quite frankly, because there are so many metrics and numbers that still very much doubt the BYU Cougars. And unfortunately, what happened in Lubbock backed up the assertion that this team is a bit of a paper tiger. Tell me your thoughts on Texas Tech dismantling Brigham Young.
Well, I thought it was more about Texas Tech. I just think they reaffirmed that they're the best team in the Big 12 Conference. And, you know, historically, we've always talked about Tech and the air raid offense and throwing the football all over the place. Spence, their defense is what wins them games. I mean, the offense is still good, but it's their defense. And they absolutely smothered Bear Bachmeier and that offense, and they just didn't really have any answers. And it wasn't too much different than what happened with Utah at Rice-Eccles Stadium. Utah's defense kept them in it a little bit longer. The BYU's defense kept BYU in. But at the end of the day, Utah's offense wasn't able to get enough done, and they had a few turnovers. Same thing with BYU. And you know, the one thing that BYU's done so well really the last 2 years is they didn't beat themselves. Well, they had the early punt muff and some other things that went wrong. And so, yeah, I think maybe they were exposed just a little bit on the road, though, hostile environment against clearly a team that's the best team of the Big 12. So I think it's certainly a loss for BYU. We know that. But to me, that was more about Texas Tech saying we're the best team in this league, and I think they showed that. Now the battle's really for who's the second best team in this league, and I think you can make a case that BYU's in that group, Utah's still in that group, Cincinnati still has a chance to be in that group, maybe even a little bit of a longer shot with ASU too. They did beat Texas Tech. They gave Tech their only loss. So, but Texas Tech, they're the best team in this league, and again, right there on display, money well spent.
Yeah, and to your point about the way it looked, you know, I was on the sideline for the Tech-Utah game, and you were calling the game. It did look a lot like that as far as the trenches go, and that's where Tech pops in a way they've never popped before, and it is their defensive front. Because Bear had no space. He had no time. Nope. I mean, 11 carries, 12 yards. I don't think L.J. Martin's fully healthy. 10 carries, 35 yards. They did have some drops. JoJo Phillips had a big drop. Chase had an uncharacteristic drop. Parker Kingston, right out of the gates, the fumble on the punt return, then Bear put it on the deck as well. But they kicked 5 field goals, Bill. Tech kicked 5 field goals. I mean, we could talk about all the things BYU left on the field, but the stark reality is that game could have been much worse if Tech was able to convert in the red zone.
Oh, you're absolutely right. Tech left a ton on the field, too. Their red zone offense wasn't very good for a team whose red zone offense is pretty good. That game could have very easily been 40-7. Just convert a couple of those field goals into touchdowns, and you've got a much bigger margin of victory for Texas Tech. But, yeah, the front 6, front 7, whatever you want to call them for Tech, they're just really good. And that kid, Jacob Rodriguez, what a linebacker he is. I mean, this is a kid that Jason Beck, the Utah offensive coordinator, recruited and coached him at Virginia. He was a quarterback. And then he didn't want to play quarterback and be the fourth-string guy, so he went back home to Texas and became a linebacker, and now he's one of the best linebackers in the country. So, yeah, Tech's really good. They've got a very clear path now. They're not going to lose again, Spence. They're going to be in Dallas. You know, they've got West Virginia coming up. They've got UCF coming up. It's a pretty primrose path there for Texas Tech. Now, the question becomes, who do they face in Dallas? Is it BYU in a rematch? Is it Utah in a rematch? Can Cincinnati win out and get their way there? Because really, Cincinnati still controls their own destiny. If the Bearcats win out, they're there. They've only got the one loss, and they will have beaten BYU in those 3 games they've got remaining. So that's where the intrigue is right now. And, you know, for Texas Tech, now they're kind of playing, I think, a little bit for seeding. You know, where do they end? I think they're a college football playoff team for sure. Now, do they work their way up high enough if they win a Big 12 title game to be an at-large? Are they hosting a game? Where are they at? So I think the Big 12, half of it is set in Dallas. Now the other half is going to be determined over the next probably 3 weeks.
So BYU comes in last week at number 7 in the CFP rankings, and those are the only rankings that matter moving forward. Oregon was able to get it done. Iowa top 20 win. My guess is, you know, they either stay at 9 or move up a spot. Everybody in front of BYU won. So when you look at Ohio State, I think they were they were on a bye. Indiana barely survived. A&M won. Bama won. Georgia won. Ole Miss won. My guess is Tech probably moves up to 7. I don't think they'll move them past the top 6. And if BYU falls, which they will, I don't think they're going to fall past 12. So my guess tonight, Bill, is we're going to see BYU 12, Utah 13. Give me your guess.
I think BYU could – they may not fall as far as 12. I think 11 or 12 is probably that range where they fall. I could see, Spence, Vanderbilt leapfrogging Utah because they played last weekend and had a good win, and maybe moving up to 13 and Utah down to 14 just because they didn't play. But, yeah, I think BYU's not falling out of the top 12 for sure. I think they probably go to 11. And I think that Utah's either right there at 13 or maybe they slip a spot to 14. Obviously not because of anything they did because they were off, but maybe they reward Vanderbilt for getting a nice win last weekend.
Yeah, that's right. Vandy did beat Auburn, and, of course, Auburn's looking for a head coach like half of P4 is. So so potentially Vandy moves up. Virginia, Louisville both lost. So, yeah, I could see that reasoning. But when Bill, we check on this every single week, and part of me just looks at it and kind of wonders, like, is this real? But the advanced metrics that the CFP committee themselves tell us they use, namely Football Power Index, where they have Utah at 9. They've got Texas Tech up to 11. BYU's all the way down to 17. The S&P Plus at this point is Texas Tech at 4. Utah at 7, and then BYU down to 22. I bring that up because if you stretch your imagination, is there any chance tonight the CFP shocks all of us and has Utah actually ranked ahead of BYU?
I don't think so, because that would be a pretty precipitous drop for BYU. And because they've still got the head-to-head, and Utah didn't play last week, it would surprise me, Spence, if they did. But I think what you just pointed out, the advanced metrics are why they've got Utah at 13. And I could absolutely see them keeping them at 13 because they like those things. But I would be surprised, if not anything else, because of the head-to-head win that BYU had and really them still having that one-game advantage on Utah. I would be surprised if they dropped them past where the Utes are.
Before we move over to the Utes, if you're a Utah fan, you have to cheer for BYU to lose another game and Cincinnati to lose another game. In that case, with a 3-team situation with 2 losses, you move from head-to-head to win percentage in conference play and strength of record, which Utah actually should have the advantage as far as over BYU and Cincinnati. That's a lot of ifs, and you hope that certain things go down, but this TCU game, look, BYU, the line opened up at 4.5. It went up to 5.5. It's back down to 4.5. BYU is a 4.5-point favorite, okay? So when you look at the way Vegas does this, typically they build in 3 for the home team. What they're saying is if this was a neutral field game, it would almost virtually be a pick 'em. And TCU's an interesting team. They're one of these teams. Look, we talked about this last week. I'll reiterate it. This is a conference that has 3 elite football teams: Texas Tech, Utah, and BYU. Then outside of that, this next tier of Cincinnati, Houston, Arizona State, like TCU is in that next tier. I don't know where you put them. They barely lost to Iowa State, but they should not have lost that game. Like, they're a couple of plays away of really being a one-loss team. K-State is the one team that really smoked them. They had Arizona State on the ropes. They should have beat Iowa State. Like, there's a world where they're legitimately a team that has the quality of an 8-1 team right now. What do you think BYU's up against at home coming up this weekend?
It's a good question because I don't know which TCU team shows up. On certain Saturdays, they do look like a team that could contend for a conference championship, and then you've got head-scratchers mixed in there too, which is really weird when you've got a team that's got a veteran quarterback and a team that's got a lot of players that have been kind of through the ringer before. So I honestly don't know what to expect from TCU. I do know that if they're on their game, they can absolutely beat BYU and Provo. But the problem is, can they force BYU into mistakes? Because that seems to be where BYU's kryptonite is when they make a mistake or two. If BYU stays on schedule and they're in that building down there, they're a pretty hard team to beat. And I'm not sure if TCU's got the defense that can kind of get them off schedule at home, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's also a night game, and BYU is really tough down there at night. And again, healthy favorite, not a big-time favorite. But, some challenges ahead for BYU. Everything is still on the table for them. Should they win out, they're going to Arlington. But if we move over to Utah, before we get to Baylor, any insight on the bye week? Second bye week, of course, there are things like getting healthy and making sure you're ready for the stretch run. But any insight on how Witt and his staff utilized this second and final bye week?
No, that's kind of what I'm going to find out tonight when I go over and do the coaches show. I usually kind of get my intel and my downloads on Tuesday night, but my guess is they probably addressed it like they do most bye weeks, get those guys off their feet just a little bit, do a little fine-tuning in practice. But to be really fair, they were playing good football heading into the bye week. They were doing some nice things going into the bye week. Back-to-back wins, going near 100 points, beating a really good Cincinnati team, beating the brakes off them, really. They needed the bye week like everybody does, that second bye week, to get healthy, and I think they actually came at a good time. First week of October, first week of November for them. So I'll find out tonight. We'll hear on the coaches show at 6 when Kyle and I sit down and chat in his office. But my guess is they probably handled it pretty straightforward like they usually do and did a little fine-tuning and getting themselves ready for that stretch run because, Spence, everything's still on the table. I mean, this is not, a team that's just playing for a good postseason bowl or trying to spoil somebody's season like kind of Baylor is. Utah's got everything there, but their margin of error is none. They've got to win every game, and if they do, they've got a chance to be both in Dallas and maybe in the playoff too. Since
losing to Brigham Young, they're like plus 140. It hasn't even been a fair fight, and Colorado's not good this year. No. And look, I think Cincinnati in certain matchups is more or less a solid football team. They just don't match up well with Utah. And by the way, I don't think they match up well with BYU. I think BYU is going to go down there and get them. But what does it say to you that – because, look, that rivalry week, that BYU game, win or lose, both sides in the past have allowed that emotion to adversely affect them in the coming weeks. We saw it with BYU last year. But what does it say that Utah was able to compartmentalize that, leave it where it was, and move on and just play elite football for 2 straight weeks?
Well, I think it's one, they are a really good team when they don't get in their own way. They got their own way in Provo. Whether it was the conversions or the turnovers or things like that or the lack of tackling, they got in their own way. When they don't get in their own way, they're a really good team. And again, I think it also helped that you had a pretty beat up and struggling Colorado team coming in that next week and you were at home. So this is a good football team, Spence. And I think it's a team that on a neutral field would be right there in a fight with Texas Tech. On a neutral field, I think could beat BYU for sure. But they've got to have that chance to do it. Obviously they're not going to get the rematch with BYU, we don't think, because I don't think Texas Tech is going to fall down and lose their last 3 games. But this is a really good football team, and it's the football team we thought they'd be before the year. But in their two losses, they got in their own way. And as long as they don't do that in the final 3 games, I think they'll win out.
If you're Joey McGuire, if you're the head coach of Texas Tech, the team you least want to see across from you in Arlington is who and why?
I would say probably Utah, because I think Utah is a little bit better rounded, and I think they're a little bit tougher in the trenches. But I think if you're Joey McGuire, you feel pretty good about either one of those matchups. But I think you just manhandled BYU pretty good. And Utah's maybe a different team than the one you faced. It will have almost been 2.5 months since you played them. So I'm going to say Utah, but I don't think, to be fair, with that team that he's got, he's wildly concerned about who he's playing.
Do you feel like there's that big of a gap between Tech and everybody else? I mean, you're right. And with all of the metrics we talk about, all the numbers we talk about, like the rankings have favored BYU, the advanced metrics have not. The advanced metrics have favored Utah. The rankings have not because they have 2 losses. Both the advanced metrics and the rankings love Tech. Do you feel like there is a sizable gap between Tech and everybody else? Is it time to just admit that and say it out loud?
I think so. Yeah, I think right now that's fair to admit because they've proven that. But what I will say is if Utah is healthy, and Devin Dampier in the second half of both of their losses was hurt and not himself and not able to move like he is when he's at 100%, I would say that I would like to see Utah get a crack at Texas Tech with Dampier at 100%. And where the offense is now, and especially with the way that defense is playing. The defense, I think, is in a better spot than they were in that game in September, too. But to your original point, yeah, I think it's fair to admit they're the class of the conference, and everybody else right now is playing for second.
So down to Waco we go, where the Utes find themselves as a 9.5-point favorite, a healthy favorite, even though they are on the road. You referenced, it's 8.5 now. It moved since we started the show. So 8.5 points. Utah's an 8.5-point favorite. You know, you referenced the bye week coming at a good time. I just, with how well they were playing, I wonder if they just would have preferred to keep it going. But Baylor's also coming off a bye. You know, it's interesting, Riles, when this is a Dave Aranda coach team, their offense is actually what's carried them when they've played well. Best offense in the conference is Tech, then Utah is a 2. Baylor is the 3rd best offense overall in the Big 12. And if we move over to the defensive rankings, the worst team is Oklahoma State, of course. Then it's Colorado, West Virginia, and Baylor. They're the 4th worst defensive team in this conference, and it feels a little bit like the Cincinnati situation because they're the 2nd worst team in the conference at stopping the run. Like, this to me is shaping up for a game. And look, it's on the road, it's conference play, all those things, but it feels like this is a game that Utah should go down and win, and I think they should also cover.
It's funny you say that, Spence, because I told somebody yesterday, because I was starting to dig a little bit deeper into Baylor to get ready for the game. They remind me of Cincinnati, but with a tougher schedule. I mean, that's really what it is. If you look at who they've played a better schedule than Cincinnati has, but here they are, elite quarterback, good weapons in the pass game, On defense, you look at them on paper, Cincinnati had guys that were good players on every level, but overall, defensively, their numbers stunk. Same thing with Baylor. Their defensive numbers, when you look at them as a team, aren't good, but they've got guys that are good playmakers on every level. This really, to me, sets up a lot like the Cincinnati game does for Utah. Baylor is terrible against the run. The matchup that's going to be interesting is Baylor's the number 1 pass offense in the league. Utah's the number 1 pass defense in the league. And Utah does it really well with good pressure up front with John Henry Daly, Logan Fano, but they're really good on the back end too. So if Utah can run the ball, I think that just changes everything. And the numbers would tell you they should be able to run the ball against Baylor. What I'm going to be really interested to see is can they slow down Sawyer Robertson, who's having a really, really good year. And if they can do that, I'm with you. I think Utah should probably win the road game.
Wayshawn Parker appears to kind of solidified himself. And look, I'm not knocking on Nakari or any of the other options. Devin likes to run the football as well. But 607 yards, an average of 7 per, which is wild. And final few games, he's going to have to go big if he wants to get to 1,000 yards, but it's not completely off the table. With 3 games left, he's going to have to average about like 120 and change. Do you think we'll start to see him feature a little bit more and maybe some more carries and some more touches for Wayshawn?
I think you're to your point. He's probably one by a nose. I think they all have different roles, but he's the guy that can give you the home run ability every time he touches it. Daniel Bray can too, but he's still a freshman. They kind of utilize him in a little more specialty role. But I think Wayshawn's that guy, and I could see him get to 1,000 yards. It wouldn't take much. You just said 120, 125 yards a game. That's certainly doable. He'll be on the coach's show with me tonight, by the way, too. And he seems, when he gets the ball, to know what to do with it and getting downhill. Doesn't mess around a lot, tries to get downhill, and then when he gets into the open field, he's got that ability to run away from guys. So I think they all have their role. He's kind of the lead guy. I think Makari's a little bit more short yardage, tough yardage guy, and then Bray's kind of your specialty guy.
Before we start getting texts and people that have nothing better to do than knock on my math skills, it's 131 yards per game over the final three, just so we have that clear, Riles.
Very good.
All right, before I set you loose, San Jose State, Weber State, Holy Cross, ultimately the non-con schedule for the Utes this year on the basketball side, a little bit unserious, but I'm fine with that. It's kind of the way I talked about BYU's soft landing spot in football this year to make sure their freshman was ready for conference play. But 3-0 so far. Just give me your early takeaways from calling these games and watching the first three games for Al up there as the head coach.
Well, you can see them getting a little bit better every game. Last night, the win over Holy Cross by 18 was their most complete win, Spence. They didn't play very well in the first half against Weber State and found themselves down 7 at halftime. Gave up 49 in the first half to Weber. I don't know what Alex said to him at halftime, but whatever happened changed. Got it to overtime and won that game. They gutted it out just a little bit. But you can see them getting better and better and better each week. And last night they were very complete. What they have are two guys that can score the ball at a really high level in Don McHenry and Terrence Brown. And Keanu Dawes does a great job on the boards. I think they're going to be helped out a lot on Saturday to get James Okonkwo back, and that's going to help them on the rebounding side of things too. So, yeah, you're right. It's it's a little soft early on, but it's going to get tougher. I mean, they go down to that MTE in Palm Springs, Grand Canyon's a tournament team most years. Ole Miss is down there. Iowa's down there. Then they'll have Mississippi State coming in. Then they'll have a trip to Cal and Washington. So there's tougher teams coming, but considering there's so many new faces on this team, I don't mind that paper soft or, whatever you want to say, Kleenex soft schedule early to let these guys, again, 12 new faces, letting them play together a little bit. But you're starting to see roles emerge a little bit. And, guys, and I'll tell you what, Terrence Brown is a really nice scorer. He doesn't do it from the outside, not a three-point shooter, but he's a guy that can just get to the rim. He's got an uncanny ability to get to the rim and score. He had 36 against Weber. He had 21 last night. McHenry's a nice player, too. He can score. So you at least have a couple of guys that you can put the ball in their hands and get a bucket.
Last thing, do you think this is – we were going over some of this with we had Joe Cravens in studio. Last year, the SEC was the best college basketball conference in the country. I think it's the Big 12 this year. I mean, your Jayhawks, they lost to Carolina, but that Darren Peterson kid, my goodness. And obviously Brigham Young, we could keep going. Houston, is this potentially the best?
How about the Koa Pete?
Yes, and by the way, did not know much about him. Watched that opening game against Florida. I'm like, wait a second, he might be he might be just as good as the other dominant freshman in this league. Do you think it's the best league in college basketball this year?
It's early to say it, but man, they're really good. And then we didn't even mention Iowa State, who's loaded again. The number one team in the country, oh, by the way, the Houston Cougars,
yep.
They're running. Kelvin Sampson just plays his style of basketball, and they play too. I don't know if top to bottom, Spence, but I think you'd be hard-pressed in the Big Ten, SEC, or ACC to find 6 or 7 top schools that are better than what the Big 12 has right now.
All right, Riles, tell us about our good friends at Handy and Handy. They stop by the program every Thursday.
Well, I don't need to tell you, Spence, because you know Preston and Garrett. Great guys, personal injury attorneys, have 45-plus years of experience between them in representing Utah clients that have been hurt on the job or in car accidents, whatever it might happen to be. they're just good guys, and they give you personalized service at a time when you really need it. So if you know somebody that's been in an injury or any of that stuff, or you know somebody that needs a personal injury attorney, give Handy and Handy a call. You can find them online at handylawutah.com, and those two guys will take really, really good care of you. By the way, big hoops fans too, Preston and Garrett. So give them a call. They'll talk some hoops and take care of your business too at Handy Law Utah.
Okay, buddy. Enjoy the Coach's Show tonight. Thank you for the time.
Thanks, Spence.
Bill Riley, voice of the Utes. Kyle Whittingham, Coach's Show, comes your way coming up in just a bit. All right, we'll catch a break. We have 1 hour down. We have 3 hours to go. Craig Bowlerjack and Andy Larson. That's our 3 o'clock hour. And then we'll catch up with our friends from the Fierce Fighting Championships and do some pro football with Lindsey Rhodes. Busy Tuesday show. Good to have you with us right here on ESPN 700. Kyle Whittingham, Coach's Show, comes your way coming up at 6 o'clock tonight. We got Wayshawn Porter, and we've got, who's the other player that's joining Witt tonight?
Blake Cotton,
Wayshawn Parker joining Coach Witt, and, of course, Riles will have that for you. Bill joined us last segment, 3-time Utah Sports Broadcaster of the Year. And our next guest can also boast the same. What other radio show over the course of an hour can boast 6 different Utah Sports Broadcaster of the Year awards? Only this one, Craig Bolerjack. How are you, sir?
Hey, Spence, I'm Will. How are you?
Good, man. I'm good. Before we get to the Jazz, Nico Harrison lost his job today, and it just felt like the clock was ticking. I mean, my take on the whole Lucas situation, well documented. In our business, there are a lot of people that just want to be incendiary, and they're going to zig when other people zag. I didn't hear anybody be like, yeah, that's a good idea. Any surprise that Nico was let go by the Mavs today?
No, in fact, I thought maybe it would happen earlier. Spence, I'd say when it all happened, it was in the dark of night. I mean, it reminded me of when the Kansas City Kings packed up in the middle of the night. I was in, I think, just my early first year of high school, and the Kings disappeared to Sacramento. And it was like, what happened? And it's almost like the same feeling in Dallas when Luke is gone, and they say, what happened? And there was, I think a wait-and-see kind of attitude. But you remember there was outrage with Dallas Maverick fans. I mean, you lose a franchise, basically, and what's crazy is Kyrie then tears the ACL, and then they somehow, with a 1.8% chance, gets Cooper Flagg. It hasn't worked out to this point, and it's interesting to see what direction Dallas is going to go. Nico took a lot of heat for it, and now it's time that they've decided to move on and find a different way to rebuild this franchise. And I wouldn't think that would be the case. But, there's a lot of behind the scenes discussions that you hear, around the league, and you make a trip into Dallas and, whether or not they were willing to pay Luka, and, they were concerned about his, off-season regiment of working out, and they weren't willing to pay, and they wanted to move on and get, something back in return. But, boy, look what he's doing in L.A., right, without LeBron. And so that just throws, I think, more gas on the fire, and Dallas decided to make the move today. And so Dallas is struggling. They've actually lost a game, 8. The Jazz have lost 7. And so they're actually below the Jazz in the standings in the West, and the Jazz are on a rebuild, and it looks like Dallas may be in that same position right now. How strange is that, right? In 5 or 6 months' time, how different things have happened. Even for the Indiana Pacers, who played in the NBA championship series with OKC 5 months ago, are 1-9 through the first 10 games because of injury. All right, Tyrese and others. So it's you never know what's going to happen in the NBA day to day, and this is a good example.
Yeah, it wasn't just that he traded Luka; it was the way he went about it, and then he reset. Yep. He reset the Lakers. That's the other thing that just sucks. I mean, LeBron more or less. He's in the December of his career. And Luka Doncic, when he traded him, he was 25. He's 26 now. And really, if you remember the way LeBron played in his mid-20s when he was dominating pro basketball, he played a lot like Luka. Like, it's a perfect player to slide in there in his mid-20s to make sure when LeBron steps aside, the Lakers are relevant for another 10 years. So it wasn't just that he traded him. He reportedly didn't even shop him. He just called Rob Pelinka and was like, let's do this. Like, it's not just the decision in a vacuum. It leads me to a conversation I wanted to have with you about your experience with roster constructors, because Nico has this past history of being a Nike executive. He was a marketing guy and basically was given the job because of his relationships with players that he'd worked with at Nike, which is why he traded for Anthony Davis. But I don't care if he's your best friend. You do not trade away a 25-year-old generational superstar. And if you're going to, you make it known to the league, and then you get the best offer. I didn't love that the Jazz moved off of Donovan, and I understand why they did, but every night I'm watching Donovan continue to improve. But at least Danny made it known, like, hey, he's going to be moved. Bring me your best offer, and he got some value. Danny Ainge got more value for Donovan Mitchell than Nico Harrison did for Luka Doncic. But when it comes to roster constructing, what are some of the dynamics you've seen over the years? Because you've worked with a lot of the Jazz have had some elite roster constructors. What makes an elite roster constructor?
Well, obviously that's a great question and one that is a good hour-long discussion. But, from my observation, obviously you have to be connected to the game. And what I mean is outside of the NBA, going into college and overseas now more than ever, Spence, because there's a lot of great talent that is found in France, in Italy, all over in Germany. I mean, just it's a world. It's a game now that spreads worldwide. And I think you have to have a staff with you that are great scouts and talent finders, right? And also now with the age that is so, I think, impactful in this league, and the Jazz are feeling it, Spencer, as well. And I think Cooper Flagg, he's 18. Look, it's a lot of pressure to put on one young individual to say, change our franchise now. And, Ace Bailey is the 5th pick and got his first career start last night. Look, they see talent, but how long does it take for him to actually grow into his body, grow into his mind? And I think you have to be, quote, a risk taker, but also understand the risk, but also be a really good judgment of the personality of the individual, more so than ever in today's world. And how do you get to know an individual, a young man, so quick? It's hard to do, but you have to have connections and people that you talk with. I think that's another part of the equation. You have to be a part psychologist. It's like, just so you understand what makes that player, on a given night hum. I think Will Hardy's trying to do that with the assortment of players that he has. He has to know what makes them tick, and so does the general manager who's making these decisions. Spence, it's not an easy job. Man, let's be honest, because the millions of dollars involved, and you're handling an owner's checkbook basically to make decisions on who to keep, who to pay, whose contract to pick up, who you make a restricted free agent or you decide to sign. And it's not easy. And fans aren't patient either. So, I think it's changed a lot since the Kevin O'Connor days. I really do. Dennis Lindsey came in, had some, highs and lows. You're going to miss. I think that's the one thing fans have to realize is I think you're going to miss on some picks. And it could either you are able to sidestep it and fill it back in, or it's going to put you back a few years in the development of your franchise. And then how do you build around those players, Spence, that you actually, draft, and then who do you put the pieces around it? It's a job, I tell you, it sounds intriguing, right? But I don't know if I'd want it. And it's a tough one. And there's a lot of money out there and a lot of, impatient fans, and also the same with ownership. I think even more so, like I said today, than it was 5 years ago. And think about the Sloan era. It was really just, as he always said, just come and work. Show me what you got. Because, they didn't do the analytics and all the above. They just kind of went on gut feeling. But now there's so many different options and things you have to plug in to that decision-making process. Wow, it's a tough job.
Tell me what you've seen from Austin since he took over. I know you've had a chance. I think you interviewed him both during Summer League and early on in the season, if I remember correctly. And he is now, Ryan Smith himself said the final word is Austin's, or the final recommendation to Ryan, who as the owner will have final say, is Austin's. And one of the things that I've liked about it so far is he appeared to be more willing to rip the Band-Aid off than maybe his dad was. And let's move the vets. There's no reason to really have these vets around. If the noise about Ace Bailey not wanting to live in Salt Lake was real, he was like, screw it. I don't care. He's the best option for us, so I'm taking him. So I've kind of liked that kind of, attitude that he's taken. I'm just going to remove emotion from these decisions. I'm going to do what's best for the team. And look, there's a lot that needs to fall into place for Austin to be able to continue this build or this rebuild, however you want to characterize it. But what are your impressions of Austin Ainge so far?
I've been impressed. It's a tough situation to come in, and there's dad, and then all of a sudden son, right, jumps into that seat. And, for Ryan to give him that type of, let's just say, respect, and also, gosh, Spence, to be honest, the responsibility that goes with that, especially with downtown construction, reconstruction, what they're doing with Delta Center, what they're doing with the practice facility out south at Southtown. Man, it's a lot. It's a lot. And the Jazz want to move fast along. Yeah, I think. But from our conversations, I find him as a basketball guy, obviously was with Boston for years under his dad. He knows the game. He's well respected. We travel and people talk all the time about Austin as the real deal. And, you said it right, ripping the Band-Aid off. I thought in his press conference he just said it straight up to the media. He's been very open about, the challenges of development in this league and the youth that has arrived upon the scene of the NBA and the patience that you have to have. And again, it's still, I think he's in that honeymoon stage in the sense of just getting to know the franchise, and you have to get to know it very quickly. But he's also put a lot of trust in Will Hardy, Spence, in developing these players and the rest of this coaching staff. And they have high praise for Will. I've watched Will now for 4 years, and, he has an incredible ability, I'll say this, to connect and treat each player with a different kind of approach. Every player is not the same mold, especially now when you're 18, 19. You're going to treat Keontae or Ace Bailey much more differently than you would a veteran of Kevin Love or George Niang now, right? So you have to, I think, pace yourself, and that's what the Jazz are trying to do. Give these players a chance to grow quickly, develop them, but also give them the support, I think, in the weight room, but also with the mental growth that you have to have, Spence, to succeed in this league. Kevin Love was open about some of the anxieties that he has suffered and dealt with, and I applaud him. It happens to a lot of athletes. It happens to a lot of individuals, myself included, and that is something that I really, praise Kevin for, is that you put that out there, and I think the young players kind of gravitate to him. And we had last night, there was, comment from Ace and Love calling them P5s, pick five. And Kevin's been great for him, I think, just to kind of tell him what it's like to take this league step by step. And Big T talked about being mentored as well by Big Mark Eaton and Darrell Griffith. You have to have somebody to lead you along the right path as you grow. I think the Jazz have done a good job with Austin in developing that, and I hope that just continues, because I think that's going to be a real piece of the future of the NBA, is how these younger players develop, not only physically, but how they develop as men, as individuals, and as they grow year by year. And I think the Jazz are trying to get ahead of that game.
So I have not had a chance to catch up with you since the news about Walker came down. And, Number one, you feel bad for the kid. You feel bad for the player. Number one, you feel bad for Walker. The reality is this injury is probably going to cost him millions of dollars. Now, he's good enough and has enough tape and has enough proof of concept that it just takes one team to fall in love with him and then, give him close to a max offer, and the Jazz will then have the option as to whether or not they want to match that. So, number one, you feel bad for Walker, and you hope he gets back. A shoulder injury like that is a serious thing for a player that has to lift his arms to rebound and block shots. There's my medical analysis of the injury. But the other side of it, Bowler, is, and this sounds cruel, this is a cutthroat business. It actually might work out to the Jazz benefit, because we've got the top 8 protected pick. We know that the Jazz need to hang on to that as far as this rebuild. That's an asset you want. And then ultimately, maybe you get a player you like on a more affordable deal. I hate to even bring that into consideration because the injury sucks for the kid, but what was your reaction when you heard the Walker Kessler news after a really stellar start to the season?
Yeah, I think Walker worked extremely hard, Spence, in the offseason. Sophomore year was tough, but you know what? He injured that shoulder about that time, if you remember. That was 2 years ago. He's tweaked it several times since, a couple times. in games. And I don't think there was any decision but to go ahead and get the repair. You're right. The timing is horrific for any athlete when they're looking at potentially, restricted free agency and trying to see what his value is out on the market. And the Jazz would then make that decision on whether or not to match it or let him move. But it comes at a horrific time. But I give him credit for, on media day, just saying, look, here I'm going to say it. I'm going to say it once. He said that he was disappointed, but he was going to focus on his game. And he did a great job in the offseason. I thought he looked stronger. He was willing to run more. He was willing to distribute the ball. He was willing to also, and I've watched him for years now, well, not years, but a couple of years working on the three ball. And he knocked down a few to really kind of electrify the crowd opening night against the Clippers and a couple of games after. Is he going to be a stretch big that's going to knock down threes on a nightly basis? No. But if you can put some doubt in the minds of your opponent, then you accomplish something there. And I think he has a good release and a good shot. But he's not going to be a three-point guy, as you know. I mean, he's a rebounder. He's a rim protector. He moves around the paint well. He runs. He can, be an offensive and defensive rebounder, and he can also pass the ball. And he had something going, big to big, Marketing and Walker and Flip. Those three guys were kind of formulating a nice little, three-way big combination there for a while. But it comes at a horrific time, and what happens, I think he's going to be fine. Young enough to recover from this injury. You hope it's not going to nag him throughout his career because he's so young. But the repair allegedly went well, and he's on the healing process, and you just hope that, he finds his way back with the Jazz, if that so be is what, Austin wants. But they also want to look at the price tag and have flexibility with the cap, Spence. And you know what? That's really what it comes down to, right? In every scenario, in every facet of professional sports is what's the money, how much will it cost, what do we have left to offer if we need to, a free agent, and that is really where it all comes down to. How much money is Ryan Smith willing to go above and beyond, or are they going to try to stay within reasonable means, as they build this roster? And I think that's really telling, to be honest, because, there's a lot of work to be done. And obviously the Jazz know they need some cash to make some other moves as this process continues.
So give me your thoughts on Will, as far as tinkering with the rotations. 9 players have started games this year, and Isaiah Collier is now back and healthy. We saw Ace get his first start. And this could be a matter of still learning about the team. It could be a matter of waiting for players to get fully healthy and fully fit. But do you think at some point the only players that have started every game, Marketing, Keontae, and Svi, randomly enough, which I didn't see coming at all, right, but he's been pretty solid. So what do you think Will's doing here as far as his tinkering goes? Do you think he's just trying to understand sort of what hand he's been dealt?
I think, Spence, he wants to see who wants to play. He's mentioned that to us in the press a few times. And I think, again, to play for the Jazz, you have to play both ways, offense and defense. The last 2 title teams with Boston and OKC are two-way guys. I mean, they bust their tail on the defensive side, and the Jazz desperately are trying to find those type of players. Harkless, when he gets minutes, has been, busting his tail on defense. Walter Clayton Jr. still learning the game, but yet has a little bit more maturity to him, and yet maybe he's just a bench guy for the moment. But I think Will's going to tinker with it. I think he wants to see the combinations and who really is going to earn those minutes. That's the key word here. Who is going to be consistent enough to be on the floor and give the Jazz a chance to win. Now, will they win? That's another topic. But the chance to win, to be in ball games, to learn how to win and build a winning attitude again with this franchise. It's been a while since postseason has been in Salt Lake City, and fans are itching to get back to that kind of fun. And I get it, man. I'd like to be there too. Makes my job easy when you call 10 and 12 point wins every night. But the Jazz have shown some interesting flashes, but then all of a sudden you see a third quarter or a first quarter that comes about, and you're down 20, or you're down, or you lose 15 like last night. 40-25 in the third quarter. Those are the things that Will Hardy is trying to get this team to realize, is that you can't take a break. And if you do take a break, you're off the floor. And, I think that this year in particular is uber important, Spence, on who stays and who goes. And I think Will has made that very clear, that this is a difficult league. And you know what? You may not be good enough to make it. And so let's see who has the talent and who has the desire to go out and bust your tail and play both ends of the floor. And if you do so, then you're going to come along for this ride. And I know a lot of coaches feel the same way with their teams. I mean, just because you make a roster doesn't mean you stay. And I think that's what the Jazz are trying to do right now, is what pieces do fit, what pieces do not. And that's where Austin and Will and Jay-Z are working together to say, hey, look, we're going to go here. This piece stays, this piece goes, and then this piece comes in. And I tell you, it's a big jigsaw puzzle, right? But hopefully they can put it together quicker than some other teams around the league. And there's some pieces there too, Spence. I think it's just a matter of, again, how long do you wait to make the evaluation? To me, I think that's the toughest part of it. Is when I was 18, what am I doing? I wasn't even a grown. Are you kidding? Were we grown men? No. Had we grown into our bodies? Absolutely not. Mentally, were we there? No way. And now I think that's what's more difficult for coaches and GMs who make these decisions, kind of going back to your original question, is you do roll the dice, and you're going to hit and you're not. And you hope that you hit more than you don't, because, the whole part of this is you've got to hit on a franchise-changing player. Then you have to, like OKC, do you fit another piece alongside of him, like SGA, to make them into title contenders each and every year for a 10-year run? And that's what obviously Golden State was able to do. OKC's on another hot streak to start the season, and that's what they're trying to accomplish too.
Before I say you loose, we saw Ace in the starting lineup last night for the first time. The numbers won't completely blow you away, but if you watch the game, there were some eye-popping moments like that reverse dunk. It's moments like that where you go, okay, like, you can see the raw potential. The measurables are all there. It's, in my opinion, the most exciting prospect we've had since Donovan, and it's good to see him in the starting lineup. 10.7 boards. He was active on defense with 3 steals. Tell me what you saw from Ace last night and how you think his progress is coming along.
I like his attitude, Spence. There was negativity during the draft. He made management change. I think he's totally embraced what the Jazz want and do. I think he likes the city, or he's saying all the right things. But I like his athleticism. He is astute in shoot-arounds and practices. He likes to learn. He watches film. I think he's got a couple of good veterans around him to help him make that step into the league. It's not easy from 1 year of college into a man's game, the NBA. And we did see a flash last night. Man, it took me right out of my seat. Underneath reverse 2-hand put down. Wow. I mean, athletic and long, can play defense, hand in passing lane, runs the floor. It's all, as you said, all the intangibles are there. And now you just have to wait for it to grow and blossom. And how long does that take, Spence? I think that's the biggest question. Walter Clayton's a little ahead of the game because he stayed in school, right? And he was on a big stage winning a national title at Florida. He was impactful on both the defense and offensive side. Thurl talks about it all the time. He won a national championship, as people know, in '83, North Carolina State, and he was taken number 7. But he was more mature. You know what? And he came in with more mature players as well. And I think the league, that's where the change is right now, is just the maturation and how long can you wait for a player to actually show you what he is. And, boy, I tell you, patience are hard, aren't they? I mean, ask LSU football. I mean, it's either I remember when I got recruited, it was like a coach had a 5-year contract, and that was just pretty much standard because they knew they were going to bring in a recruiting class and let them grow into seniors and then see what they had. Nowadays, if you last 2 years, you're lucky, but that's how impatient collegiate and professional sports are. Win now. because the money that's involved now with contracts and alums are so high, Spence, that there's very little patience. And the Jazz are trying to be patient, I think is what I'm trying to say. And Will Hardy wants to win. He's in his fourth year, and he wants those pieces to come together, and that's what his job is, to make these guys grow fast and hopefully move ahead quicker than some people may think.
All right, Bowler, we'll appreciate the time. Have a good call tonight. Pacers in town, and you got a nice little stretch at home, so that's always good. Enjoy that too, will you?
I don't mind it. I don't mind that, my friend. Stop by. You got to stop by. You got to come roll through the arena.
I will be there on Thursday. Quinn's in town with the Hawks, so I'll be there on Thursday.
Yeah, the Quinn Snyder, the mad doctor of the Atlanta Hawks now. No, it'll be good to see him.
All right, my friend. Be good, okay?
Take care, Spence.
The great Craig Bowler-Jack, TV voice of the Utah Jazz. Nice little home stretch for the Jazz after a long road trip. 5 of their next 6 games are at home. They've got a quick trip to L.A. to take on the Lakers next week. Indiana tonight, Atlanta on Thursday, Chicago on Sunday. So some home games for the Jazz. They've lost 6 of 7 because, well, you know. All right, Andy Larson will join us. We're going to get to know our friends from the Fierce Fighting Championships. They got an event coming up this weekend we want to tell you about. We'll do some pro football with Lindsey Rhodes. Back to college football in the 5 o'clock hour. Don't forget, the Kyle Whittingham Coaches Show comes your way when we say goodnight at 6 o'clock. And then Utah women's basketball taking on UVU tonight at about 7 o'clock. Before we catch a break, really excited about a new client we have on the show and on the station because I've been working with them personally now for a while. And they've helped me get into the best shape that I've been in as an adult, okay? Because it's tough when you get older. If you age into your 30s and your 40s, your 50s and beyond, it takes more consistency. It takes more work. And it really is just not what it was when you were in your 20s, where you could just go to the gym for a few weeks, maybe clean up some habits, and then boom, you're back at it. So a couple years ago, I had a goal to get in the best shape I'd been in as an adult. Hit the gym, cleaned up some habits, was eating very clean. And after about 3 months, I just didn't feel like I was making any progress. And I was talking to a friend who asked me if I had ever supplemented testosterone and recommended Game Day Men's Health. So went in there, got a consultation, and they're giving you this consultation for free as a result of them being a client on the show. The consultation is just a little bit of blood work. Going to take your blood. They're going to go over your levels. Then they're going to recommend the products they have that can help you get into shape quicker. They can help you improve your libido if that's low. The workouts are 10 times better. You actually have more energy and you're more motivated to work out. So I went in for a consultation. They recommended that I supplement some testosterone and utilize some of their peptides. In the next 3 months, while using their products and continuing to be consistent, I made like 5 times the progress that I did in the 3 months prior. And I've been consistent with it, and I'm now in the best shape that I've ever been in as a grown-up, and they can do it for you as well. They also have semaglutide, tirzepatide, all the weight loss stuff that people are talking about. Like if you go to Thanksgiving and your aunt shows up and you're like, oh, okay, well, she's clearly on it. But it works for a lot of people if you need it. Okay, so you get the free consultation, but here's the kicker. They're giving you 50% off your first-year membership, which makes this stuff incredibly affordable. It's the deal they give me, and it's one of the main reasons I go see them. A lot of these products back in the day more expensive for like celebrities, rich people, elite athletes. That's not the deal now. So go to GameDayMen'sHealth.com, schedule your consultation, tell them you heard me talking about it. They're going to give you that consultation for free, and they're going to give you 50% off your first-year membership. 4 locations. I go to the one in Cottonwood Heights, but they have one in Lehigh, Pleasant Grove, and South Ogden. It's our good friends at Game Day Men's Health. GameDayMen'sHealth.com. We'll catch a break and bring in Andy Larson live in studio. Coming up on ESPN 700. Kyle Whittingham Coaches Show comes your way at 6 o'clock tonight. So stay tuned for that. We're going to do Utah women's hoops tonight against UVU. After that show is wrapped up, we'll send it over to Utah women UVU basketball at about 7 o'clock. Your week 10 of the NFL culminated with a dog-you-know-what game last night at Lambeau. 10-7, the Eagles won. We're going to bring in Lindsey Rhodes coming up to talk some NFL. But Andy Larson, good enough to join us live in studio from the Salt Lake Tribune. Hello, Andy. How are you?
Good, man. How are you?
Great to see you. Appreciate your time as always. We'll do some jazz. But before we get there, you've been branching out a little bit this fall. You've been doing some college football, and it's always fun to kind of see how your brain works in other spaces, namely some of the analytical and data stuff in college football. And for weeks, there's been this weird dichotomy with our local teams where the advanced metrics continue to value Utah very highly, but they have 2 losses, so they're not ranked the way that BYU is. BYU ranked higher because they beat Utah head-to-head, but the advanced metrics do not value BYU. Were you surprised to see Texas Tech dismantle BYU the way they did?
Not really, and nothing in that game surprised me the way it played out. I think you could look at some of the ways that just Texas Tech's defensive line so strong, did so well against Utah's offensive line, which is I think stronger than BYU's offensive line. In that first matchup, they were good. I just think Texas Tech, and if you look at like the Pro Football Focus metrics, if you look at like all the defensive metrics, you look at what like James Rodriguez is doing, like is one of the best teams in the country by nearly any potential way you can look at it now. So, I was not particularly surprised. I saw a lot of fans kind of on BYU Twitter saying, hey, we don't think the team showed up. I don't think it was that. I think you just kind of got smacked by a significantly 2-touchdown, 3-touchdown better team than BYU is.
Yeah, it was interesting. The line comes out at 10.5, and I went, dude, because the thing about BYU under Kalani, even when they've lost, they have not been blown out. Like, this is their worst loss since, I think, November of 23. I think it was Iowa State who got them down in Provo. So I was surprised to see Tech not just cover, but double the cover. They were a 10.5-point favorite. They won by 22. That kind of shocked me a little bit.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. And, maybe if Bear doesn't throw one of the picks or, you don't have the Parker Kingston punt mess up, maybe you see a different score there. But I don't know, 3 touchdowns felt about right, given how Texas Tech played in that game. And maybe, and some of those field goals turn into touchdowns, maybe it's a bigger. So I think Texas Tech is just probably was a little bit underrated, honestly, going into that game and showed people to a national audience on ABC, Chris Fowler and everything else, like that they are a real team as good as any of the top 3-4 teams in the nation right now.
Yeah, they kicked 5 field goals, and for all the BYU fans who want to say like, well, we left a lot out on the field. There were a couple of drops. You referenced the Kingston fumble. Bear puts it on the ground. Okay, you left some out on the field, but Texas Tech left a lot of points out on the field. Like, in reality, that could have been a bloodbath in a way that it kind of was, but it could have been a lot worse.
Yeah, like maybe the fair score is like 42-14 or something. It's and again, maybe this is just me believing in BYU having seen what they've done the rest of the year, but I do just think that, like, the way Texas Tech destroyed Utah in that fourth quarter here at Rice-Eccles was really impressive to me. And then the way they just took care of business in the biggest possible Big 12 matchup you can have in the regular season, that's just a really good team that spent $40 million on its players. Yeah. That's what it comes down to. They bought the best talent out there, and you're seeing the rewards of it. That's, to me, what college football is right now, or at least why Texas Tech is where they are. And it shows.
Yeah, it does. And I referenced kind of the dynamic of the metrics not loving BYU, but them being ranked higher and Utah being ranked lower, but the metrics loving Utah. Texas Tech has both. The metrics love them, and they're ranked where they probably should be.
Yeah, and seem to be well coached as well, and dealt with quarterback injuries well. I just think that is a good, solid team. Kind of the one that kind of I think Big 12 proponents have been looking for the last couple of years is like, who's a real, this is not a TCU situation where it feels like they'd be blown out in a championship game, right?
Yeah.
Like it sounds like, it feels like they would be pretty competitive with the best of the SEC and the Big Ten.
So ultimately, if you're a college football fan and you reach mid-November with hope, you're winning. That's a good thing. I mean, there's so many P4 teams across the land. Like I was listening to a Baylor podcast earlier today because Utah's playing Baylor coming up in Waco. And the host's assertion is Baylor football does not fire coaches that win 8 games. Like if you win 8 games, that is a big win for a Baylor head coach. After the Art Briles stuff, obviously there was a rebuild. And I wonder if both BYU and Utah fans really understand like how lucky you are that more often than not, when it comes to mid-November, you do have things to hope for. Of course, Utah's injuries last year derailed the season, but both Utah and BYU in mid-November still have a lot to play for.
Yeah, have realistic chances of making the college football playoff, and then who knows what happens after that. You have to hope for a really fluky kind of, maybe fluky is not the right word, but the Cinderella kind of run, right? But yeah, these are two teams that are in the college football dialogue right now, and that is absolutely not something to be taken for granted. This is a really good football year, and I think a year that needs, certainly from a Jazz point of view, which is what I mostly cover, but needs that kind of sporting success elsewhere in the state. You're getting it from the college football programs this year.
We'll see what the CFP rankings say tonight. I think BYU, who fell to 12 in the AP, I think that's probably where they're going to be. And I don't know how you can move Utah past BYU. I feel like we might see Vandy move up. They beat Auburn, but I feel like it will be BYU 12, Utah 13.
Yeah, that's kind of what I think. Either BYU 12, Utah 13, or BYU 13, Utah 14 feels right to me, right? And then, you still look at the other games that are coming up this week. I mean, both Texas and OU have difficult opponents this week. Both teams have realistic shots to make it into the playoff. I think both, if they win the Big 12, obviously, but also as kind of an at-large team, even if you don't make the Big 12 championship game.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know that I can stretch my imagination for the Big 12 to get 3 in, but if you kind of play this forward, because I said all of last week, the one thing BYU has to avoid is getting stomped. They didn't avoid it. But I do think BYU has a good chance of winning the rest of their games. TCU's a sneaky team. Should have beat ASU, did not. Had Iowa State on the ropes, lost. They're a couple of pivots away from being an 8-1 team. But BYU's at home, night game at Lavelle. That's a tough place to play. Cincinnati matches up horrible with Utah, and we saw the result. And BYU plays a lot like Utah, so I think BYU gets them as well. But if BYU goes back to the Big 12 championship game against Tech and gets smoked, and Utah convincingly wins their final 3 games, I could see Tech getting in and Utah getting in and BYU being left out, even though they would have 2 losses.
Especially if the Cincinnati game is close, right? Like if BYU struggles against Cincinnati, or if it's a touchdown score, whatever it is, then all of a sudden you have a real case of, and look, this isn't rock, paper, scissors, but you have a case over the course of the season that Utah had one big loss to Texas Tech, which BYU now also has, and one little loss to BYU, which, I think is a game that could have gone either way. Obviously, BYU was a better team on that day, and I'm not arguing that. But, I don't think that the head-to-head mentality is insurmountable, right? I do think that is something that if you look at the totality of the rest of the evidence, and it points to Utah, the College Football Committee has shown that they are going to be pretty analytics-heavy in the way they make these decisions. I could see them taking a Utah that doesn't make the Big 12 championship game over a BYU team that loses big in one.
Can you imagine the persecution complex reflex if BYU is left out and Utah gets in as an at-large? Like the natives, Andy, will be somewhat restless. Fair to say?
It will be good for sports radio, though.
Oh, no, I want it. Bring it. No. Look, people ask me all the time, who do you cheer for? And I say, everybody. Okay, I want everybody to win, or I want chaos.
Right.
One of the two is better for my business, for sure.
Yeah, and it sounds like, if you're getting teams in the, college football playoff mix plus some chaos, and frankly, that mix is always chaotic, it's a good time to be in the business.
One more thing here. If you're Joey McGuire, you're the head coach of Texas Tech, who do you not want to see in Arlington? Who do you fear the most as far as your Big 12 championship opponent?
I mean, it's hard to say they should have fear for. I mean, it was Arizona State, the team that
beat them, yeah.
I think, I don't know that you fear really either BYU or Utah. Maybe you fear Utah a little bit more given a healthy Devin Dampier, when compared to the first game. But ultimately, I do just think that they are the stronger team in the trenches, which is usually Utah's strength. It makes it really hard for Utah to really, win that game unless it is an upset. Some weird things happen. They get some weird turnovers and so forth.
Yeah. No, we'll see. I mean, plenty left. BYU and Utah favorites to win this weekend. TCU's in Provo. Utah is in Waco. All right, Andy, here's a sentence I didn't think I'd say. BYU basketball made a trade with the Knicks today. Well, they didn't make a trade with the Knicks, but they signed a G League player from the Knicks organization. And I don't know how many college basketball fans are kind of in tune with this, but this is a thing that's very much allowed.
Yeah.
Unpack this for us.
Yeah, it's a weird situation because, obviously the amount of money in college sports has been increasing and the rulings in for the NCAA in terms of who is eligible have gotten more and more lenient over the years. So, we've seen EuroLeague players now, move to the NBA, including some guys who have been drafted. We've seen that at BYU before with Mihailo Boskovic, right? Mm-hmm. Like as EuroLeague player moving to the NBA, a little bit with Yegor Demin as well. Now you've got a G League player who's played for the Westchester Knicks for 2 years, signed by BYU today, committing to BYU, and so will kind of be the likely starting center for BYU next year. Once Kebaketa leaves, and he's was the backup center for the Westchester Knicks. He's 22 years old, is a rim protector, has no other real NBA skills, right? Like he just is one of those big men who protects the rim, but. He had, I think it was 2 blocks a game or 2 blocks per 48 minutes in his time with the Westchester Knicks. So, yeah, like it's players who have played professional basketball, including in the NBA's minor league system, are now eligible to play in the G League and or in college basketball, and that is a change, and it kind of makes sense given the financial incentives, right? Like. He's going to make way more money playing for BYU than the $47,000 that he made with the Westchester Knicks last year, but it's still kind of a weird setup that requires some getting used to.
Bill Self was asked by the Kansas City Star what his opinion is, and he said, quote, "My personal opinion is I have no idea what we are doing." It's just it's chaos across the landscape, but you can't blame the kid because to your point, he's just getting paid more. For an opportunity to play for a coach in Kevin Young that now has proof of concept with Yegor Demin and is coaching the number one player, number one recruit in the country, and AJ DeBonsa. Like, I don't blame the kid at all.
Yeah, and either way, you're getting NBA level coaching at that point, right? Like, so even if your dream is to make the actual NBA, which he was not close to with the Westchester Knicks, but you're getting NBA level coaching. The coach of the Westchester Knicks, by the way, is Dasagna Diop. Which is a name you may have forgotten.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know he was coaching.
Yes, he's been coaching them for 3 seasons now.
Interesting.
So is Kevin Young a better coach than Dasagna Diop?
Yeah.
Probably, resume wise, right? Mm-hmm. So anyway, it's just it totally makes sense for the kid, but it is a wild situation. That's not, high school recruiting isn't the game anymore.
Right.
The game is AAU recruiting, and then also just go get professional players from around the world.
Yeah, and what BYU has shown to be elite at in both basketball and football is circumventing certain angles to find things that they're allowed to do to add talent where it feels like maybe other schools have been asleep at the wheel. Like Bill Self, Tom Izzo have been asked about this signing, and they're mad about it. But again, it's not against the rules. I think BYU deserves a lot of credit for taking advantage of this era of very small, if any, regulations to do what they're allowed to do to kind of build their athletic department up. They've done a good job.
Yeah, I mean, now there are even rules in kind of the NBA level in terms of, NBA teams aren't allowed to go to high school games to scout in general. Mm-hmm. They can go to big tournaments and AAU thing in the McDonald's All-American game and blah, 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 but they can't go to individual high school games. But now, colleges can obviously do that, and then colleges can go to the pros games to scout those players. So it's almost like Ryan Smith has more shackles on him from a Jazz level than he does from a Cougars level, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah. I hadn't considered that angle. That's interesting. All right. Will Hardy has started 9 different players. And, Walker's, of course, hurt, gone for the season. Ace got his first start the other night. Isaiah Collier's now back and healthy. is there a method to this as far as rotationally what you think he's doing?
He's trying to make the Jazz competent and competitive as possible for as long of this season as possible before it all goes down the drain, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think everyone kind of understands that you can't be competitive for all 82 given this roster and given where the Jazz are in their rebuild, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, everyone knows you can't give up this pick to Oklahoma City. It's top 8 protected. You definitely really want to get one of these top 3 guys in the NBA draft. And if you don't, you are kind of listless as a franchise, as frankly the Jazz have been over the last few years.
Yeah.
In the meantime, Will wants to establish some sort of reasonable culture so that this doesn't turn into the Charlotte Hornets or the Sacramento Kings. And the way he thinks that he can do it is by keeping, basically playing time and minutes in line with what the coaching staff is asking for.
Mm-hmm.
That has led to stuff like Svi starting and playing 30 minutes, for sure. And Nurkic is now your starting center because they don't have any other centers on the roster, and other than Kevin Love, who's even older and worse. It just is, it feels like Will Hardy is like kind of clawing for every bit of like respectability and competitiveness and effort he can get out of this team while he still can before it turns into the last couple months last year, which was obviously a little bit of a joke, right? A little bit of a farce, and enough that the NBA fined them for it.
Is there any possibility that all of this is intentional to make sure that they back up what Austin Ainge said about not, tinkering with lineups in order to lose games on purpose? Does it feel like there might be a chance that they're actually doing that without saying the quiet part out loud?
I mean, I think they are playing who they think the players who can help them win the most are, right?
You think they are?
I think they are. Like, I think right now Will thinks that Svi is a better player than Ace Bailey. And that doesn't mean that Svi is a better player than Ace Bailey, next year or in a month even, right?
Yeah.
Like, but in terms of, and frankly, you look at the plus minuses and it's hard to argue a ton. Like Svi has actually played kind of well this year. Isaiah Collier still can't shoot, and Ace has been like a minus 15 in nearly every game that he's played.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of good stuff with Ace Bailey, don't get me wrong, but if you were trying to pretend to win basketball games for a while, or even trying to win basketball games for a while just to prove, to kind of teach a level of competitiveness, this is probably close to the path you would do. And I think that's what Will's goal is right now.
Tell me what you think your preferences as far as how these minutes are distributed is, and your point about Nurkic, and Nurkic has actually played pretty well. Once upon a time, there was a debate that Denver had between do we keep Yusuf Nurkic or Nikola Jokic. You remember that? Like, he's not a horrible player, but he's not part of the future. And we talked about this a bit last year when some of the vets were eating up the minutes. For the sake of development and potentially seeing what sort of hand he's been dealt, what do you think he should do rotationally?
I think this is probably about it. I would do some things differently with regards to probably the center position. I'd probably play Kyle Filipowski or Taylor Hendricks there a little bit more. I probably do play Svi less and give Ace a little bit more time there. I give Bryce a little bit more time there. But he's trying to push the buttons of the guys in ways that he thinks they'll respond to. And he believes that kind of the one tool he has there is their minutes, is their NBA playing time. So, I'll say this in Will's defense, like the Keontae George developmental project has shown real fruit this year. He's been really good, and it might be because he was benched at the end of last year and, maybe had a rough exit interview where they frankly told him, hey, you're not going to be in the NBA if you keep this up. That has woken him up a little bit, and now he looks like one of the best and maybe only like long-term pieces on this team. So on the other hand, you can point to some, negative developmental cases like Cody Williams, right? So I think they're doing what they can with some pretty imperfect clay right now, right? Like it's just the players they have aren't NBA competitive in a lot of cases.
On a scale of 1 to Anthony Bennett, where are we at right now with Cody? And look, I want to be clear. I hate that, we keep bringing it up, but it's a top 10 pick. And when you look at the history of top 10 picks, a lot of them don't work out. This would not be the first time in NBA history. The problem is for a team that really is trying to claw its way back to respectability, it's hard when you miss out potentially on a top 10 pick, and we're seeing him like not even playing at all. What do you make of it?
He's not close to being an NBA player right
Yeah.
now. I mean, I watch him in warmups, and he's airballing threes coming off of fake screens, right? Like it's bad.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just the shooting that's bad. It's also that he doesn't rebound. It's also that he's not, the handle's not good. He's not strong enough. He's not a defensive playmaker. It's all bad. It's frankly, Anthony Bennett was a better player as a rookie and sophomore than Cody Williams is right now. I mean, he needs to get. I was stunned not to see him in the G League today. I went to the Stars game at the Delta Center earlier today. He should be in the G League just getting reps at this point, because that's the only way he has to be, and if he flips the switch and somehow becomes more aggressive as a player, I can see him becoming like a real role player. I kind of like his brain, but man, he's just so far away in so many ways that, I think there are literally 50 to 100 G League players that are probably better than him right now.
That's rough. We saw Ace get his first start, and there are moments like you see that reverse dunk and you just go, yeah, that's a really exciting thing to see. Your overall thoughts on how they've decided to kind of incrementally bring him along, and do you think we're going to see him starting moving forward?
Yeah, I'm really impressed with how he's been part of the team, right? Like the kind of rep on him was that he was going to be taking bad shots kind of out of the offense and in and out of kind of defensive effort, and we haven't seen that. Like, he's been playing as part of the team. If anything, he's probably passing up too many shots. Like, he hasn't forced his game at all. It's been great to see. I think, then now the question is kind of, is he good enough to do, is he going to be a star in the league, or is he going to be a good role player? And I think that's going to be determined by how much he can improve the handle, how much he can use that athleticism to be as functional as we saw in that last dunk, right? Like in the half court, not just in full court transition kind of stuff. But Ace's stats look really bad right now. I think the eye test is pretty strong on him in terms of just having the right attitude and mentality. And I think the Omar Cooper stuff also just did him a huge disservice, right? Yeah. Like, and maybe the casual fan thinks that he's a head case. He's not at all. He's like the most enthusiastic young player I've seen the Jazz draft in my time covering the team in the last 10 years. He's a great kid to work with, it seems like, and it's just like kind of whether or not his skills get to the point where he can be kind of the star that people envision for him.
Yeah, I think he's the most exciting prospect we've had since Donovan. I don't think that's really even hyperbolic. All right, speaking of Donovan, a lot of conversation about the Mavericks trading Luka, generational superstar in his 20s, and I kept hearing people say teams don't do that. I'm like, well, the Jazz did. Apples and oranges. You and I both know the behind-the-scenes stuff that led to that decision. I think I'll always question certain portions of that teardown, but ultimately I get it. But Nico lost his job today, and it felt like the clock was ticking. And it wasn't just that he traded Luka; it was how he went about it. He didn't shop him. I love that Rob Pelinka got Executive of the Year when all he did was answer his cell phone. But ultimately, he is now unemployed. Give me your thoughts on Dallas's decision.
Obviously, the right decision in saying that it was ever allowed in the first place. Probably will go down as the worst general manager in NBA history. Mm-hmm. The Luka trade is maybe the worst trade in professional sports history. I can't think of another one that's particularly close, and not one that was so indefensible at the moment that it happened. One that the player didn't want it. In the Donovan case, the player wanted the trade.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And in Luka's case, he wanted to stay in Dallas. And to give that up for a ancient Anthony Davis, who's injury prone as all get out, plus only one first-round pick, is malpractice, and the fans accurately called it out. I feel so bad for the fans of Dallas.
For sure.
I feel bad for people who just give their time and energy and passion to like be a part of something and then have it ripped out from under them like that for no reason. It just sucks. I think I legitimately just like grit my teeth when I think of Nico Harrison, because it's just not fair to those fans. Yeah. He shouldn't have another job in basketball. He should be made fun of every time he's in public. Like it's just an insane thing to do. And as you pointed out, the way he handled it was even more arrogant than the decision himself.
Hire basketball people to run basketball teams. I know. I'm old school that way.
I mean, this is something we were talking about at the office the other day, but like the Jazz hired a Nike executive too, but as kind of in a, not even an assistant GM role, as like one of the executives on the staff. And look, it can be helpful to have someone who worked in Nike basketball as like a connection builder, right? Like, so Chuck Terrell is a guy in the Jazz's front office who's since departed, now as the GM of Georgia Tech. But like, it's useful to have connections, and it's useful to have that guy, be able to make deals, kind of get rolling. You should never have that guy as your decision maker, as your basketball executive, as your talent evaluator. Yeah. No, and and now it sounds like the Mavericks may go in the other direction and go with Dennis Lindsey, who is only a talent evaluator first and kind of everything else second. So yeah, we'll see. Like, but yeah, like just hiring Vibes guy as your GM is such a bad move.
Yeah, no, 100%. All right, last thing, I'll set you loose on this. I like Pablo. I feel like a lot of RSL fans don't, and I might be biased because I've been able to get to know him a little bit. Kurt Schmidt, who also is a guy who I like personally, that one is interesting to me. I feel like Elliott built a good team, and they fired him, and Kurt has had a lot of window misses, and he gets an extension. We don't know what the roster is going to look like, but we did get news, and it's a multi-year extension for Pablo and Kurt. Just give me your reaction.
Jason Kreis said at his press conference that this level isn't good enough, that they want to be an elite team. It's difficult to see necessarily how that changes when you keep the same coaching staff and same general manager. And maybe, maybe they get more resources to make better decisions. But frankly, the most troubling thing about Kurt Schmidt is that he has messed up the DP choices to this point. And so it's hard for me to believe that he would be making better choices with $5 million than he's made with $3 million. Pablo, with Pablo, I kind of agree with you. I don't think that he's necessarily the problem with RSL right now. But it's really easy to. I don't think that he's the solution either, right? Like, it just has had the run with a variety of guys that shows that, like, I don't know that he has the fan support anymore, right? Mm-hmm. And so, I think it's just disappointing, right? And now maybe they go out and sign an incredible European star for $20 million this offseason and make it all better, but it doesn't sound like that's their plan at all. It sounds like they want to kind of keep it cheap.
You got to spend money in this modern day.
You got to spend money in the modern day MLS to have a chance.
You do.
And it's I get it that Philadelphia is really good and they just have a gazillion better, more experienced decision makers than RSL does right now.
Yeah, they do. So we'll see. The preseason's going to be here in like 10.5 weeks, even though MLS playoffs go until like January or something. Andy, great to see you. Thanks for the time as always.
Sounds good. Thanks, Spence.
Andy Larson, sltrib.com, at Andy B. Larson on social media. We'll catch a break. We're going to get to know our friends at the Fierce Fighting Championships coming up. Lindsey Rhodes stops by for some pro football. And we'll get back to college football in the 5 o'clock hour. Kyle Whittingham Coaches Show at 6 right here on ESPN 700. I'm glad you found the edited version of the song. Little DMX on a Tuesday afternoon. Fierce Fighting Championship coming up on Friday at the Salt Lake City Masonic Temple here in downtown Salt Lake. We got Zach Partridge in the house. What's up, Zach? How are you, man?
How you doing, Spence?
I'm good. Good to see you again. And Blake, my man. How are you, Blake?
Wonderful. How are you?
Pronounce your last name.
Aurelian.
Oh, just like it's spelled. Aurelian. I overthought it. All right, Zach, let's start with you. We were just talking off air. I've never been to a Masonic temple. Porter comes from a long line of Freemasons, so we've already talked about that. It sounds like a really interesting, cool surrounding for a fight. Talk about the atmosphere.
For me, and from the feedback that we've gotten from our fans and the people that come to our show, the thing that's unique about the Masonic Temple, it's a mini stadium. There's not a bad seat in the house. The seats go right up.
Okay.
You're right on top of the cage. And so the energy is just kind of, it's almost like you're in an old cathedral, too, because it's a 100-year-old building.
Okay.
Cement building.
Yeah.
And so everything just, all the energy and everything, it's just electric in there. When it gets packed and we get, our almost or sold out crowds, the energy's unreal. So you get the big show feel, but the intimate small show vibe. And for me, it's my favorite venue that we've ever had or been a part of, like, putting fights on at.
Give me the origin story. Like, how did this partnership? It does not seem like your typical venue. Like, how did you guys find each other?
Okay, so ironically, we used to do shows at the Maverick Center every 3 months, and when the Utah Stars went to the Maverick Center last year in 2024, we had a huge card teed up for our end of the year card.
Okay,
and the Stars took all the available weekends. So we didn't have a place to go, and I had this huge card built.
Mm-hmm.
So we needed to find a home, and so I kind of called around, and somebody just said, hey, I looked at this spot. It's a little small for what you guys are looking for, but it's cool.
Mm-hmm.
Go check it out. And as soon as we checked it out, it was like, this is the spot. I split that mega card up. It was meant for the Maverick Center into a November and December show. I hit up all the fighters that were scheduled and said, this is what happened. Would you rather fight on this date or this date? They all picked, and we kind of just lined it up, and we made this mega card, 2 full shows, and we kicked it off there. And so the Masonic Temple it's an old building that is trying to generate revenue to be able to stay alive. And honestly, Fierce Fighting Championship being there is what is keeping it alive right now.
Oh, interesting.
So, like, 2026 is a big year for them that we're doing stuff, but we're also trying to help them bring other events there, weddings and things like that.
Okay.
And other events. I mean, recitals, dance recitals, you name it, band showcases, anything we can get in there, we want there to keep that building because it's on the historic registry for here in Salt Lake.
Okay.
I mean, it's over 100 years old, and it's a beautiful building, but they're just not making enough money for the upkeep on the building. So they invited us in, and I mean, we put on fights there. We have the cage in the auditorium. We have R&R barbecue doing the vending.
Nice.
We have our alcohol permits. We're doing alcohol and sodas, and like, it's a full-on sporting event in there.
You were able to get an alcohol permit at the Salt Lake Masonry Temple. Like,
Yes, sir.
This stuff is so interesting to me because no part of my brain ever, because I drive past that thing I live up there. So
Yeah.
I drive past it every day, and I'm always like, huh. And now they have events. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, how we got there, it is pretty wild, but I just think they needed somebody. And we've had to work around some things, and it has some unique challenges, but at the same time, as we're there and we're bringing money there, they're making the upgrades needed on the building to make it better. And as we continue to do that and bring more to it, we're there almost every month.
Okay.
We'll be there from this November show all the way till next May. We're there every month.
Awesome.
So,
Blake, let me move over to you. So Blake Aurelian, who's a broadcaster for the fights, I've been doing this 20 years, and there's a real difference energetically. I love doing my show in the studio, but we do a lot of remote broadcasts or I was with the Jazz for 7 years, pre-F and post. If you're in the arena, it's a little bit different than you're upstairs in the studio. What sort of energy is this Salt Lake Masonic Temple for a broadcaster calling the fights?
I'll never forget the first one when we were there and we were all encompassing, and there's people on top of people in this place. It's well spaced out, obviously. But it's such a finely put together place that all the noise comes straight to the center, and you can feel the energy. And I mean, from broadcaster to broadcaster, you can beautifully lay out and hear the eruption of this crowd and just let that play out, and people at home can hear it as well and really feel the energy. It's such an incredible place to go and watch fights and to broadcast there. I feel extremely lucky to do so.
So I'm going to have to just show up and check this out because I have so many different questions. The term I keep coming back to is energy, right? Like, because this is a place of worship for certain people, and this is a historical building that's been around forever, and I don't know what goes on behind closed doors, but I have to imagine, Zach, all of it just must, like, add to this compendium of different elements that the energy must just be something that's very unique.
It is. It's unique, and like I said, I don't think that there's a better place to hold events in Utah, but like you said, it's a religious building, so it's sacred to them, and we try and respect that, and there's certain things that we can and can't do that maybe we would normally try and do it at a normal venue, but out of respect for them, we don't. But at the same time, too, when we got there kind of on a trial basis, there was a lot of their members that were pretty apprehensive about a cage being set up in the auditorium and where they do their ceremonies, by the way, and they said, we don't know. But the thing that they loved is they said that every time we leave just how we found it. Like, it's like we were never there. The time lapse, if you go look at our social media, it's really cool. The time lapse is, a cage goes up. We're out of there 2 hours after the show like we were never there.
Cool.
And so they can get on to doing their regular things, and, we help support them, and it's great.
Where can people find your social media pages?
At Fierce Fighting Championship on Instagram is awesome, and also on Facebook and TikTok, and then our website, fiercefightingchampionship.com.
Have you fought there?
I have not.
You have not. Okay.
I can't fight for my own show. So I run Fierce.
Oh, yeah.
And so I can't fight for my own show. So I fought primarily in St. George for a little promotion down there.
Okay.
I fought at the Maverick Center at BKFC
in
May when
Very
they were
cool.
here. And then I just a couple weeks ago took my first trip out of state and went to New Jersey and fought out there.
Oh, good for you. Good for you. Blake, what's your origin story? How'd you get into this? How'd you get into calling fights?
So I began broadcasting when I was about 17 years old in high school. And so a lot of that was studio work, teleprompter, hosting, things like that. As time went on, went to college, did a lot of hosting and things like that. But I really wanted to get into the play-by-play space and primarily wanted to get into the MMA world if any way possible. And so I started with this smaller show called Mountain Force MMA. They were doing a lot of work up in Logan, Utah, so I would just drive up 2.5 hours. And then I had taken a little bit of a backseat, just school got busy and work and life and all those different things. And again, still in college, I get a wonderful text message that kind of changed my life from this guy to my left in Zach. And he said, hey, I heard one of your broadcasts a couple years back and thought you were really good. Would you like to come and try something out? Would you like to come and do a show? Did the event, came up to him after, said, thank you so much for the opportunity. I'll never forget it. He said, you're the guy. Left and been doing it ever since. Very
cool. I'm going to follow up with the broadcaster's take on the main event, Teague Vigil, Leon Taylor. What should we know?
It's a special one. I mean, Teague Vigil has had a little bit of I guess, a lack of luck. He's had 4 fights scheduled this year. Only 2 of them have come to fruition. This one, hopefully on Friday, as well as one a couple of months ago, came away with a victory. He's now won 2 in a row, trying to make it 3. He started off his career 0-4 and has completely turned a corner and is now really, really turning into a kind of a first-round finish machine and an absolute terror. He actually trains in the room with Zach up north just a little bit. On the other side is Leon Taylor, who, again, they were slated to fight about 6 weeks ago. Leon ended up getting kidney stones, was in the hospital the night prior. Right after cutting weight, he was struggling a whole lot, but this is his first fight since 2019, but is very eager to get back. He's lost about 70 pounds since, I believe, March of this year, and so he's really had a transformation to get back to this spot. And then, again, on the other side, Teague Vigil really picking up the pace right now.
Zach, the old saying, styles make fights, right? So give me your thoughts on your main event.
Big thing is that you have to know when you get guys that come from the era of fighting that Leon Taylor comes from, they are older, but they are scrappy, they're crafty, they've been doing it a long time. And when guys that came up fighting. This is like our new era now where kids have been training their whole lives doing those things, right? Leon's one of those guys where if you look at him, he doesn't look like the guy that you're going to say is like, oh, that guy is a very skilled fighter. But I guarantee you he's been in a room long enough that he knows a lot of tricks. He's very crafty veteran type stuff, right? Where Teague is, he comes from the more traditional style. Two-time state champion wrestler at Syracuse High School.
Okay.
Now coaches there. He is a wrestler through and through, but also has an extensive martial arts background in his striking. So it's a little unorthodox, but I mean, he's a wrecking ball. And I mean, he's one of those guys in the room that, I mean, he has one pace and one pace only, and that's 100% all the time. So whether it's in the cage or in the room, like, you better bite down on your mouthpiece because he's going to punch you.
Very nice. Let's move over to Anderton calendar. Drake Anderton, Blake is defending, is it a AMI heavyweight title? Is that what it is? Let's break this one down. What do you think?
Yeah, came away with the heavyweight title in July. He was going up a weight class and has really been good when he's above that 205-pound threshold. He's got Barris Calendar on the other side, a 3-0 prospect in his own right. So I'm really excited to see these guys. We talked about it a little bit yesterday, but Drake Anderton, the son of Dave Anderton, who is kind of a local legend here to the Utah scene. And so seeing him kind of follow in his dad's footsteps has been really special. And also Drake himself just says, I do this to make my dad proud. And so far, so good on his amateur stint.
So, Zach, let's go to you on this one. 3 fights in 3 months seems like an aggressive schedule. Tell me about Jet Swain. He's trying to capture the light heavyweight title.
Jet is he's a throwback. He's a little bit. Usually fighters they want their full fight camp. They want a bunch of prep time, and they want to know their opponents, and they kind of pick and choose opponents. They say, I need this right now or whatever. That's kind of the new wave of fighters. Jet's a little bit of a throwback where he's the type of guy, he should be a 185er.
Okay.
He doesn't care. I believe Blake said in college, he didn't cut weight as a college wrestler.
Wrestled at heavyweight.
Just wrestled at heavyweight.
That's wild.
Yeah. And found a lot of success, and he's doing it again in MMA.
Okay.
His last opponent missed weight by 5 pounds. He goes, I don't care. I'll just beat him up anyways. And he did.
Yeah.
He did something that I've never seen in an MMA, never seen in the Fierce Cage before. He took him down, was on top of him in full mount, dominant position, ready to finish the fight. Stood up, let the guy up, and continued the fight, and then proceeded to knock him out.
That's like embarrassing, the poor guy on the other side.
Okay, so you never see this.
Yeah.
And he has that confidence and that swagger and that ability. Again, he's fighting men that are cutting to 205.
Yeah.
That's about his walking weight. He should be fighting at 85.
That's wild.
And when he gets probably more closer to the pro competition, he'll have to get there. But that is a telltale sign of a blue chip prospect in MMA, is a guy that is fighting up 1, if not 2 weight classes. He said he'd be open to some heavyweight matchups as well for this fight. And then when nobody would fight him, he said at 85, we were trying to make this 85, nobody would fight him. He said, well, give me the 85 champ. Well, he's slated for our December card. Wow. So I said, sorry, but our 205 title is vacant. And he said, find me somebody for the 205 title. I don't care. He never asked who. He just said, send the contract.
Jeez.
So guys like this don't come around anymore in the MMA world.
Yeah.
Very, very few and far between. That's what I'm excited about, and that's what I like about Jet Swain.
If you're going to be the baddest dude in the room, you got to believe that you are, right? Blake, tell me about Hannah Silver, looking to become a 2-time weight class champ.
Yeah, no. So 7-5, she's had her ups and downs throughout the years, but in 2023, she was crowned the first ever women's champion for Fierce Fighting Championship back at the Maverick Center. She ended up losing it to a pretty high-level prospect who's now a pro, but she has stayed amateur. This is now her 13th amateur fight. I remember her debut. It was October of 2020, and she has just stayed in this area for 5 years at this point. And more than anything, she is such a submission specialist. The way that this girl can take damage, keep coming forward, and find little windows in which she can capitalize and find a neck, find a limb, whatever it may be. She has blown up the Masonic Temple figuratively with the way that she has been able to put together comebacks over the years. She's a real special fighter, and specifically her submission game is fun to watch.
Zach, you referenced something that kind of caught my attention and I wanted to talk to you about. As we were talking off air, when the UFC really started to gain traction, I had friends that loved it. Some worked some corners. One had a gym. One trained with Jeremy Horn, who's a legend. He's going to be there on Friday. And so my whole prism on this sport is the old school Tito Ortiz, Matt Hughes, all those guys, Chuck Liddell. And when you said we have a new generation of fighters, it just kind of dawned on me that we now have a generation of kids that grew up with this in a way that I'll just say I didn't because it wasn't a thing when I was a kid. How have you seen the fight game grow and evolve?
Well, we're just seeing it now. I mean, I'm 37 years old. I'm very much a hobbyist. I got into the sport to lose weight. I was 270 pounds.
Oh, wow.
8.5 years ago.
What are you, 180 now?
I'm walking around 200, but I fight at 170 or 185.
Oh, cool. Good for you.
So, and I look at it now, and even I'm like, the kids that are starting at my gym that I train with, I'm like, yeah, like I wish I would have started when I was a kid.
Yeah.
My 13-year-old son's getting into it
cool.
aggressively. Like he's starting wrestling. He told me when I turn 18, I want to fight. Well, cool. Then we have to start now because this is a sport now. This isn't like even when I started in my late 20s and early 30s fighting where you could get matchups and fight other hobbyists and things like that. This sport is evolving so rapidly. I mean, just because the UFC has become more mainstream lately, I don't think people realize, like, it's still a baby. Mm-hmm. It's only been around for, like, 31, 32 years.
Yeah.
And so think about, like, the NBA when it was 30 years old or MLB or NFL. Like, and now where it is now, like, what is the UFC going to look like in 50 years after they have, 50, 60, 70 years under their belt? It's going to be full of kids that started doing this now. And to your point, you got kids now that that are coming up, making their debuts that started training MMA when they were 4 or 5 years old, not playing soccer, not playing basketball, not doing those things, getting into the junior wrestling programs, doing jiu-jitsu at 4 or 5 years old, doing kickboxing and stuff like that. As those kids come out, and I tell the MMA world, watch out. Wait till the elite athletes start picking MMA and not basketball or not football. And it's coming. And I train with a few of them. And they're in for a rude awakening. Mm-hmm. You're going to start getting these elite athletes fighting. And the sport is evolving so fast. But there's such a technique part of it that's what's so fun about MMA is you don't have to be the best athlete in the room. Mm-hmm. But those best athletes, when they are in the room, you take notice.
That's what most people say about John Jones, right? Like he's people that would know better than I would say things like he could be an NFL wide receiver if he wanted to be, right?
By the way, he's the runt of his family.
Oh, yeah.
You got to remember that. He has 2 older brothers that were in the NFL. One of them just passed away,
right.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
Chandler Jones, Arthur and Chandler Jones, they're both Pro Bowl, I think both Super Bowl winning NFL players.
Yeah.
And they were always very quick. Why you guys all call John Jones the baddest man and the greatest MMA fight ever? Like, remember who beat him up his whole life?
Yeah.
Who was the one wrestling with him and beating him up his whole life? Like, they grew up whooping him. He's the baddest dude to ever grace the cage, and it's not even close. So, like I said, if the greatest ever is the runt of his family and 2 of his brothers were NFL Pro Bowl level guys, like what happens when the older brothers, those elite athletes, decide they go down the MMA track?
Yeah, for sure. All right, Blake, a couple of minutes left here. Let's start with you. Just call to action. Why should people go on Friday night? What are they in for, and where can they go get tickets?
It is a can't-miss event. I mean, talking a little bit about what we did at the top was, why is the Masonic Temple so special? The fights are electric. Every seat is good. You can hear a pin drop in there. When someone slaps a leg kick, you can hear it echo beautifully through the Masonic Temple walls. It is an experience unlike any other. And so when people want to go and watch, who could be the next big name fighting out of Utah, it's at the Masonic Temple on Friday night. So tickets on sale at fiercefightingchampionship.com. That's the best place in which you can get them, and can't wait for it.
Zach, we'll give you the final word. You reference food and drink. Is there an age limit as a result, or?
This is an all ages event.
Okay.
It's very cool. Like I said, it's a family event for me. Like my son, he works the show, my 13-year-old boy.
Nice.
My younger boys, I have 4 boys from 3 to 13, and they all come. They enjoy it. It is an all ages event. It's for the next generation of kids that they want to grow up and be like these guys. We have these local guys that they look up to. So it's a lot of fun. I just tell everybody this. If you like watching UFC at home, you'll love this. I promise. If you haven't been to a local show, I promise. I've been to the Delta Center when the UFC comes and it's sold out. And all those people would enjoy our show as well. If you don't love it, watching it on TV, come check it out in person, because I can't tell you how many new fans we get that come try it, think they won't like it, and now they're hooked.
Love it. Go to fiercefightingchampionship.com for more information. Zach, if we have any listeners who want to get their kids involved, tell us about your gym. Where can they get info there?
Yeah, so there's great gyms all across the valley. I'm up in Kaysville, Utah. Our gym is One Hit MMA in Layton. My head coach, Aldo Arasia, he's a world-class kickboxing champion from Brazil, and we do kickboxing and kids programs and jiu-jitsu and all that good stuff. But we have incredible gyms. Utah is a little gold mine that people don't give enough credit to in the MMA world. We have a lot of very good gyms and coaches here that you just referenced. Jeremy Horn, he has a gym in Sandy. If you're down that way, Agima down in Provo south at the Provo Mall. There are very good gyms with UFC caliber talent, coaching, all that type of stuff here in Utah.
Okay, boys, great to meet you. Good luck on Friday night. Let's get the place packed, okay?
Thank you.
All right, we got Blake and Zach. Again, fiercefightingchampionship.com. It starts at 6 o'clock at the Salt Lake City Masonic Temple right here in downtown Salt Lake. All right, we'll move our attention to the NFL. We got Lindsay Rhodes from Sumer Sports. We're back to college football in the 5 o'clock hour. The Kyle Whittingham Coaches Show begins at 6 o'clock right here on ESPN 700. About 90 minutes away from the Kyle Whittingham Coaches Show. Utah football back out of this weekend. A big one down in Waco. They're taking on the Baylor Bears, where they find themselves an 8.5-point favorite. Move over to some Utah women's hoops after that. Utah women's hoops taking on UVU tonight. But the NFL wrapped up last night with an eyesore of a Monday night football game. Hard to believe that we're moving over to Week 11, but the hapless New York Jets will take on the red-hot New England Patriots. Sumer Sports has their midseason all-NFL teams, and Lindsay Rhodes is good enough to give us some time on a Tuesday. Hello, Lindsay. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing well.
I need you to settle a debate between me and my producer as a football snob. Was last night beautiful football, or was it an eyesore?
Gosh, it's tough, right? Because like on Sunday night, I sort of thought that one was low scoring as well, but it felt palatable to me to a degree. It's funny how some of these low scoring games, you just kind of get a different vibe from them. Sometimes it's just bad football, and sometimes it's good defense. I feel like yeah, I'm gonna go. I mean, this one's a tough one. It kind of feels like it's somewhere in between the two, right? If you really, really enjoy defense,
okay,
then you maybe enjoyed that one. If you are somebody who wants fantasy points and or to see two teams that we think are going to be in the playoff mix actually like finding ways to get things done in spite of defense being good, then it was probably a game that didn't live up to our expectations.
Well played, Lindsay. You are a pro. That was that was well done, because now both of us are correct based off your assertion. But I'm going to follow up with a question I asked you last week. Are the Green Bay Packers good at football? I just cannot figure it out.
Yeah, so I think that they're really, really tricky. And it's been so interesting to watch people react to last night's game. I've seen people calling for Matt LaFleur. I've seen people suggesting that Jordan Love is not a good quarterback and they need to move on at quarterback from him. I think where I'm going to land right now with the offense in particular, because I don't think that many people are concerned about the defense, is what I brought up last week on the show, and that is I think that the O-line is an underperforming O-line. I think that the O-line is not playing particularly well, and that feels maybe a little bit like a cop-out because it's so hard for us to really analyze O-line play, right? But it felt clear if you're just saying, okay, what did it look like to us? It looked to me like Jordan Love was sped up last night. I felt like he looked like a quarterback who didn't necessarily trust that he had a lot of time, and maybe that got him out of his comfort zone. And so even in times when he maybe did have that time, he's not a calm, cool, collected quarterback because I think he isn't expecting to have time. Does that make sense? I think that the whole thing, once your environment is a certain way, you can't get that out of your head and just play football the way that you would if you knew you were going to have a certain amount of time to get the playoff. And our Sumer Score metrics, which we just did a podcast where we revealed our midway point all-pro team, which is the highest scorer in Sumer Score at each of the different positions. If you go look at the Sumer scores for the offensive linemen there in Green Bay, they are not good. And so I think keeping that in mind, that they're all relatively low scorers on the season, I think it puts everything into perspective in terms of like Josh Jacobs. It puts positively into perspective what he's doing because it feels like he's doing that in spite of the O-line play. And then Jordan Love, frankly, and I know there are people who are Packers fans that are going to get super frustrated about hearing this, his EPA numbers are kind of off the charts. And EPA, to be fair, that's expected points added. It's a little bit more of a contextual stat than are a lot of the other stats that we have that are just straight box score stats. But it is, I think it most closely tells a story about the quarterback if you're talking about an individual player because the quarterback's involved in everything. But it is still an environmental stat. It's more of an offensive stat than it is a specific individual player stat. That said, he has the second highest EPA per play in the league at quarterback. So there is, to a degree, I mean, I could go down a whole list of EPA stats. He has the 9th lowest sack rate. If we want to move away from that, he has the 9th highest yards per attempt. He's good against man. He's good against zone. Like, there are a lot of different metrics that you could create an argument for Jordan Love not being the problem. And so I know I'm kind of just went in a bunch of different directions, and I did not answer your question about whether they're good or bad, because I think parts of the team are good and parts of the team are less good. And I do think that the way I feel about O-line play is that if that O-line play doesn't get better, if that is where the problems are stemming from, I think that is something to be highly concerned about as we head down the stretch.
Yeah, and, you know, as we've talked about throughout the course of the season, Jordan's a local boy, so we cheer for him, and I think there's a lot to like with the Packers. You know, let's stay in the NFC. And, you know, maybe the Eagles are a victim of their own success. I just, look, if you're winning games, like, however you're getting it done in pro football, just get it done the way you need to get it done. But how valid are the concerns that seem to be really loud about a team that's still 7-2 and will clearly win that division?
Yeah, and the thing with the Eagles that I always think is I feel like we do this every year. So there's a part of me, and it's kind of almost a little bit Chiefs-like, where, you know, and they're different this year, but I feel like for the last few years we've been like, oh, but the Chiefs aren't impressive. They're not going to be there at the end, and then they're there at the end of the year. Like, they are the inevitable AFC representative in the Super Bowl. To a degree, I feel like it is inevitable that we go through all of this hand-wringing about the way that the offense looks in Philadelphia in particular, and then they're there at the end of the year and they figure it out, and then they go on a playoff run. And I think that they're a tough team to evaluate because it is frustrating that they're not consistent, and it is frustrating that A.J. Brown doesn't have a more consistently big role. Like, we know we have a huge sample size of evidence that A.J. Brown is one of the best wide receivers in the league. So to watch him in a game last night get targeted 3 times, have 2 catches for 13 yards, and that's it. And the stat lines like that all year long, where we're wondering what the heck is going on. I think that's where the frustration comes in, right? Like, why can't you do this consistently? I don't understand why there is always this roller coaster of drama, but I do have an expectation, just because we've been on that roller coaster before, that they're going to figure it out. And the fact that they're 7-2 when they haven't figured it out is probably pretty good signal that they'll be fine. But I do think that they are somewhat infuriating to watch.
Absolutely. No, I'm with you. And it may be because AJ's on my fantasy team. But nobody gives a rip about that, Lindsay. There are 2 other teams in the NFC that are 7-2. They both reside in the NFC West. Who are you buying more, Seattle or the Los Angeles Rams?
I'm going with the Rams. I think top to bottom, they just feel like they are flush with talent that you don't know about. And that's why they feel like they're a little bit under the radar in this way. We just, as I said, did our Midway All-Pro team. The Rams have 4 players on our first team. There were 5 teams that had 2 players, and then obviously everybody else either had 1 or none. 4 players on the first team, and then 5 if you count the first and the second team. Like, the amount of talent that they have there is just wild. And let me give you some of the names of the people who – Quentin Lake at slot cornerback, who is having, by our standards – so we've changed our scoring metric from what is your traditional percentile-based score to something that we feel like more accurately reflects the ways that players' talent levels should be compared against one another's, which is a tiered system. And it's closer to the way that teams grade players and evaluators too. And that's like a 10 through, 1, but nobody gets down that low. Quentin Lake has a 10 on the season. He is the highest rated or scoring cornerback in the league. He's their slot corner. Cameron Curl is on our first team at safety from the Rams? How many of your listeners know that Cameron Curl is a human being, or did prior to me saying that name? Kevin Dotson at right guard also made our first team. I know you guys all know that Puka made it. And then on the second team, hold on, why am I having a hard time scanning for Rams here? Oh, Byron Young, who edged out, by the way, Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett did not make our first or second team here because there are so many good edge rushers this year. We have 16 guys that scored at an impact starter level or above at that position. That position is flush with talent right now. And Byron Young, again, is a guy near the top of that list with Aiden Hutchinson and Michael Parsons and Will Anderson. And he's for sure the name out of that group of players that no one has heard of. They're just playing at such a high level. And I think, again, that the reason that people aren't as don't put them on that tier of top teams is because there aren't enough of these guys who are household names yet. But individually, they're very, very good. And then the way that they play, and obviously Sean McVay, we all know the type of coach that he is. I mean, the way he's trotted out 13 personnel in the last couple of weeks for the Rams is just, there are so many examples of this where he's concerned, but just next level coaching, where you're just looking for how can we get an edge here and throw this, get this defense in base and keep them on their heels and in looks that we want them to be in. And he finds those ways. I have a lot of faith in the Rams, and I don't give out betting advice at all. But I think because they are a little bit under the radar, they're a team that, if I was putting money on, I think that you always want to look for someone that is a little underrated that you think has the potential to pop, and the Rams are that team for me for the Super Bowl.
I tend to agree. Lots to like about, and I think Stafford's the Vegas favorite to win the MVP now, which is interesting at that age. Before we move conferences, another local player we like to follow and cheer for is Jackson Dart, who played his high school ball not too far from here. And, I think Brian Daboll's a solid football coach. I think he's a good football mind. He loses Malik Neighbors, he loses Cam Scadaboo, and unfortunately Jackson leaves with a concussion. But, results are results, and they're 2-8.
Yeah.
So this kind of felt inevitable. Maybe at some point he'll get another shot, or maybe he's just one of those guys that's a coordinator. Two-part question. What do you think is next for Brian Daboll, and how appealing is the New York Giants job?
First of all, I think with regards to Daboll, I think that some people just are coordinators. And I'm not saying that he doesn't check the boxes of somebody who is meant to be a head coach, but I think it's worth noting that there are some people who are just very, very good football minds who are very, very good coordinators who are not good head coaches, because the two jobs are entirely separate. It's like being a manager versus actually doing the job at the thing that you love doing, right? There's a lot more paperwork and red tape and things that take up parts of your day when you're a head coach that are not actually always X's and O's football. Let's find a way to beat this. And so I think sometimes, and we've seen examples of this, we see it all the time. Guys who are brilliant minds at a coordinator position get to a head coaching job, feel a little bit in over their head. They're not good at that stuff. And then they go back to the coordinator job and they thrive. And so I'm, again, not saying that he will not be a good head coach, but I do expect that he'll go back to be an offensive coordinator somewhere, and we'll probably see him hit it out of the park to the degree where we then maybe bring his name up again after he's spent a couple of years in that role. What was the other question again? Giants. How attractive is the job?
How attractive is the job? Yeah.
I actually think it's a very attractive job. I think that they've got a lot of young talent there. And I know that there are some people that are upset that Joe Shane wasn't also let go at the same time as Daboll. But I think you could make the argument, and when I was on this show last week, we talked about whether or not the Jets and the Giants combined could field a good roster. I do think that there are sporadic players there on the Giants who have just had a spate of injury luck that has been terrible, right? Like you mentioned Malik, Cam coming out, Jackson Dart dealing with the concussion, which I kind of do actually blame on Daboll a little bit. I think that some of that conversation is valid, that they put him back on the field maybe when they shouldn't have. But I think that there are some pieces there that if they continue to draft and add maybe just a few more and these players get a chance to get on the field and actually, develop some chemistry. I really liked what we saw with Scattaboo and Dart, even without Neighbors, for a little while. So I think that there is a lot to work with there, and they're young. And what's beautiful about some of those young players at those positions being locked up is that then you still have money to go spend elsewhere because they're on those rookie contracts. And so I think it is an attractive job, despite the fact that there will be a lot of criticism that goes along with it because it's the New York market. I kind of think right now is the time to swing in.
Moving over to the AFC, and, the Broncos, kind of like the Eagles, even though at times it doesn't look super pretty, they continue to win. They've won 7 straight. I saw that Garrett Bowles, friend of the program and former Ute, received a little love from you guys midseason, but how real is this streak with Denver? And they're going to see Kansas City coming up. What do you make of that?
I think we're going to find out. I mean, we talked about low-scoring games. That game on Thursday was gross, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think they're an interesting team because I think that Bo Nix is one of those guys that I have yet to completely figure out. Like, I think that there are certain things that he does well, and I do think that he might be that guy that is good enough that you can win and doesn't need to be an outstanding quarterback if the pieces are around him. But I feel like he is a little bit volatile at that position. And I don't know that I've seen that he has the ability to, take over a game or be that tractor of a quarterback. And so I'm a little bit I feel like I have yet to come to a conclusion about him. And I think that will be a big part of the equation about how I feel about them for the rest of the season. I mean, they certainly have some pieces on the line that are incredible. They have pieces on the defensive side of the ball. The fact that they went out and got Hufanga this offseason is just like chef's kiss, right? Like the rich getting richer type of a situation. And I love it when teams do that and take a strength and they make a strength stronger. I think that was such a smart signing for a guy who had the ability, if healthy, to be a game changer and plug him into a defense where you already have so many other players kind of around you who are capable of playing at a high level. And he is another guy. We have just a handful of players that have scored a 10 on our Sumer score scale, and he is one of them. And so is Bowles, actually. The Broncos have 2 of our 10s this year. But I think that addition on that defense, I know Surtain has, not been at the health this season that we'd like for him to be at. But I feel like there's just a lot that is riding on Bo Nix, honestly. And so how do you guys feel about Bo Nix there?
Well, I'm kind of biased because I was on the sideline when Bo was at Oregon and they rolled into Utah and he just dismantled a very injury-ravaged Utah defense. But I was wildly impressed. And Sean Payton probably has his detractors. He doesn't seem to be the warmest fellow, but his history of developing quarterbacks seems to speak for itself. We have a ton of Broncos fans here, Lindsay, and it's just been so long since there's been this type of excitement down there.
Yeah, I feel like they, from an offensive standpoint and most of the metrics, they're kind of in the middle of the pack. Like EPA per play, they're sitting there at 15. They're one of those teams that I keep looking for a story to hang my hat on and say that is the calling card there. And I don't know that I have a real clear picture about what their strength is. Like if you look at their offense, let's just look at their offense and say, what are they better at than the other good teams? I don't know what that answer is. And that's, I think, why I'm kind of just in the middle of the pack. You've got the Chargers, by the way, have the exact same EPA per play as the Broncos. But in their case, I know for a fact that I think Justin Herbert is a tractor or trailer or whatever word that we're going to use there. I think that he is that caliber of quarterback. And we've seen that, and he was our first team quarterback on our All-Pro list as decided by Sumer Score. So there are other deficiencies there, certainly on that team, but I can point to something that I think, okay, they could win because Herbert has the ability to win in a very tough position, still make a play. Like, there are certain things that I can describe as to saying this is why I still believe that they could beat anybody. And I don't know exactly what I would point to on the Broncos offense.
Before I set you loose, I wanted to get your thoughts on a story that surfaced earlier today that Joe Burrow kind of hinted at a return, maybe Thanksgiving. My question is this smart? I mean, if you look at what Cincinnati has, the Steelers, the Patriots, the Ravens, the Bills, the Ravens, you know, like, I don't know that it's smart to rush him back if they're not going to be playing for anything serious. I mean, look, he's Joe Burrow. He's awesome. And maybe if he's healthy, you just throw him in there. But is there any thought process that would lead to, like, hey, just, you know, this season's probably lost. You get ready and get back next year?
Yeah, it's going to depend on the next couple of weeks because they are, even though they've been outscored on the season by 84 points, which is one of the worst numbers in the AFC and NFL, they are 3-6. And the AFC is not flush with talented teams. The team that's sitting right now in the 7 hole in the AFC is the Jacksonville Jaguars at 5-4. So if you've got them with a 2-win lead essentially on Cincinnati right now, what if Cincinnati picks up a win? What if there is some space that's created there for that last playoff spot? And then I think we all know that depending on when Joe Burrow were to come back, if they were mathematically not eliminated, that I think we have faith that Joe Burrow changes things pretty dramatically for them. Now, their defense still needs a lot of work, and I don't think that they're going to go win a Super Bowl one way or the other. But I think if you mathematically are still within like earshot of that 7 hole, of that 7 spot, or any other ones. But if you can get into the playoffs, I think that you have to put him back on the field and make a run, just because anything can happen, I suppose. And so you got to go for it. And I think we'll find that out in the next couple of weeks.
All right, Lindsay, before I set you loose, where can people go find your work and also Sumer Brain? We need to hear more about it.
Yeah, so Sumer Brain is a really cool AI tool. I know some people are like, AI, ooh, bad. And full disclosure, I think AI is scary in a lot of different ways. But we have created a tool here that combines AI with a lot of coding, where we have plugged in a lot of our favorite deep data points, coverages, routes that players run most frequently. There's a lot of information that is in there that you could plug in a question, whatever question you might want to know. And it will give you information that is really, really hard to find. And you can do that for free. So at sumersports.com/SumerBrain, you could go ask which routes does Cortland Sutton run most frequently, and against which coverages does he run those routes. I mean, that's the kind of layer of question that you can ask. It does better with the most specific deep data type of questions like that, rather than like who's the best player on the Broncos, something that's vague like that. It probably won't do as well at answering. But if you're interested in finding out more information about your favorite NFL team, I think it's a fun place to play around.
Lindsay, thanks so much. It's been a lot of fun to have you on, and we'd love to do it again soon. Enjoy the week, okay?
Thank you so much, guys. Appreciate it.
All right, Lindsay Rhodes, Sumer Sports. Before we catch a break, let's welcome in my guy Leo from 7 Figures Funding on a Tuesday. Hello, Leo. How are you?
Hey, Spence. Doing amazing. How's it going?
It's going great. So let's talk to small business owners out there as far as how tough it's been lately with interest rates. Are high, banks saying no, tough to get access to capital. How can you help our small business owners?
Yeah, coaches talk all the time about playing all 60 minutes of a game and finishing the fourth quarter strong. And I know a lot of small business owners, for them, this is it. This is fourth quarter for the end of the year, and they want to finish strong. And maybe they need some capital for inventory, marketing, equipment. They need to, cover payroll until a job pays out. And so whatever their need is, we help these business owners get access to the best funding possible in our marketplace. And that might be a loan. It could be a line of credit. We even have some flexible solutions with 0% interest up to as long as 15 months, and gives them that breathing room to grow the business without the stress of high payments. And the best part is there's no risk to apply. We can get them a funding estimate, a pre-approval with a soft credit check, so their score is not impacted. And so whether you're starting that side hustle business or you're scaling and trying to finish the fourth quarter, go into 2026 with some momentum, very simple, just 60 seconds. They can go to sevenfigures.com. That's the digit, sevenfigures.com, and see exactly how much they can qualify for and talk with an advisor and see what's going to best help their business.
Leo, what about our listeners that have always felt like they've had a great idea for a small business or would like a little bit of extra revenue by starting a side hustle and they just need capital to get that done? How can you help them?
You know, it's such a good question. There are tens of millions of gig workers and side hustlers with great ideas, and they just need a little bit of capital. And it's really difficult to get startup funding at most banks. And that's where we have some creative solutions at sevenfigures.com where they can look at options. They can get 0% interest credit stacking. They can get 5-year loans up to $150,000 for a brand new business. We live in the greatest country in the history of the world where you can actually access that type of funding. And that's what we love doing. We love helping new businesses get off the ground and living that American dream.
Go to sevenfigures.com. That is the number 7. Do not spell it out. Sevenfigures.com, 833-801-5653. Leo, you're the man. Thank you.
Hey, thank you.
All right, sevenfigures.com. If you're a small business owner, if you want to start a side hustle and get some access to some capital. We will catch a break. 5 o'clock hour. They are releasing the CFP rankings coming up. So we'll bring them to you. Bill Riley stops by, Voice of the Utes. We're an hour away from the Kyle Whittingham Coaches Show. So keep it right here on ESPN 700. All right, let's get it. Drive at 5 time. Little serendipity on a Tuesday afternoon. Last week, the college football playoff rankings were released at 6 o'clock Mountain Time. They bumped it up to 5 o'clock Mountain Time, so they're releasing it as we speak, and we can bring you some breaking news as the Utah Utes come in at number 13 for the second straight week. Utah is at 13 in the CFP rankings. They were idle a week ago. That did not cost them anything. Vanderbilt, who had a nice win over Auburn, we thought maybe they would jump Utah, but they did not. They jumped up 2 spots to 14. So Miami is 15, Vanderbilt 14, the Utah Utes 13. As we await the release of number 12, I am expecting this to be Brigham Young, who unfortunately for BYU fans lost to Texas Tech, and there they are. BYU falls 5 full spots down to number 12 in the college football playoff rankings, right ahead of the University of Utah. Of course, BYU at 8-1 has the head-to-head over the Utes. BYU fell to 12 in the AP, and that's where they find themselves in the CFP rankings. So Miami 15, Vanderbilt 14, Utah is at 13, BYU at 12, Oklahoma, no surprise, they're at 11. They're up 1 spot. So Oklahoma jumps the Utes. My guess is 10 is going to be Texas. Kind of we'll have to wait and see. Excuse me. And obviously, we are waiting to see where Texas Tech finds themselves after dismantling BYU in Lubbock. So the college football top 25 playoff rankings being released as we speak. We're going to bring in Riles coming up in a little bit. And don't forget, at 6 o'clock tonight is the Kyle Whittingham Coaches Show, where they will discuss the CFP rankings. Utah stays at 13. At number 25 was Cincinnati. At number 24 was South Florida. 23, Tennessee. 22, Pitt. Number 21, Iowa. They lost to Oregon. Number 20 is Louisville. 19 is Virginia. 18 is Michigan. 17 is USC. 16 is Georgia Tech. As I referenced, 15 is Miami. 14, Vanderbilt. 13, the Utes. And at 12, we find BYU. 11 is Oklahoma. And as I referenced, we expected Texas to be at 10. They move up 1 spot. They also benefited from BYU's loss. Texas was idle this weekend. So now we move into the top 10. Some conversation about Vanderbilt potentially jumping the Utes, but they did not do that. So Texas comes in at number 10. They were number 11 last week. At number 9 is Notre Dame. They also move up 1 spot. So Notre Dame, Texas, Oklahoma, all moving up 1 spot as a result of BYU's loss. Oregon, no surprise there, comes in at number 8. Now here's where this is where it gets interesting. Texas Tech could potentially come in at number 7 because I have a hard time seeing the committee having them jump Ole Miss, Georgia, Bama, A&M. Oh, my goodness. So Ole Miss actually comes in at 7, even though they remain at 9-1. So we'll see where they land Texas Tech. Texas Tech comes in at number 6. So there you go. The breaking news, Texas Tech comes in at number 6. The only other question is whether or not they penalize Indiana for playing a close game against Penn State and potentially jump A&M over Indiana at 2. Texas A&M continues to be undefeated. They throttled Missouri on the road last week. Now, Missouri is without their starting quarterback. So we'll see what the CFP committee does with that. To me, that's probably the only piece of intrigue that is left. I think the top 5, other than that, will kind of remain the same. So your top 10, Texas is at 10. Notre Dame is at 9. Oregon, after their win over Iowa, moves up to 8. Ole Miss down 1 spot to 7. Texas Tech up 2 spots to number 6. Your top 5 is Georgia now at number 5. Georgia was at 5 a week ago, I believe they were. I'm expecting 4 to be Alabama, and it is. Alabama comes in at number 4. Now, the only piece of intrigue, whether or not at 3 is Indiana or Texas A&M, or whether or not they leave Indiana at 2 because they did win at Penn State. A&M comes in at 3, which means your top 2 will remain the same. It'll be Ohio State, Indiana, Texas A&M, Alabama, and Georgia as your top 5. Texas Tech, the big winner. They move up 2 spots now to number 6. BYU slides 5 spots to number 12. And the Utah Utes will be in at number 13, where they were last week. So no real movement there for the Utes. Of course, they were on a bye week. As we, there you go. Indiana's at 2. and Ohio State comes in at 1. So there you have it. The official college football playoff rankings are out. We'll bring in Bill Riley coming up on the other side. Then we're going to move over to the Kyle Whittingham Coaches Show. Your Utah Utes are the 13th ranked team in the country in the college football playoff rankings. BYU comes in at number 12, and Texas Tech comes in at number 6. We'll catch a break and bring in the voice of the Utes, Bill Riley, coming up on the other side right here on ESPN 700. Rod Stewart with special guest Richard Marks is taking over the Utah First Credit Union Amphitheater on Friday, June 19th. So if you are a 57-year-old single female, block out Friday, June 19th for Rod Stewart and Richard Marks. Text 877-353-0700 for tickets. Shout out Rod Stewart and Richard Marks, still doing it. College football playoff, the 12-team projection would have South Florida in at 24, Miami in at 15, Texas in at 10, Notre Dame at 9, Oregon in at 8, Ole Miss, Texas Tech, Georgia, Alabama, Texas A&M, Indiana, and Ohio State. So the college football playoff rankings that were released earlier do only have one Big 12 team in at this point. BYU, so according to the projections, Oklahoma would be the first team out. BYU would be the second team out. Utah comes in at number 13. Vanderbilt, who had a nice win over Auburn, did not jump the Utes like we thought that they might. No surprise here, Porter, right? I mean, we talked about this earlier. I felt like BYU would be 12 and Utah would be 13. That was the prediction to start the show. It's where BYU is in the AP, and even though the metrics seem to favor Utah in certain areas, BYU beat them. I mean, right. I don't know that I'm really surprised about much of anything tonight.
Yeah, no, and I think on the inside of the show, I think I said they might be 12 and 13 right there next to each other. And that's just the reality of the season we've seen so far, Spence. And as you've talked about, I don't care whether you think you are better than the other team or not. If there's a head-to-head game in which you two have played this season, I take a lot of account into it. So if you are Utah and you are looking at the Big 12, maybe not getting into the Big 12 title game and you're hoping for an at-large bid, well, in my opinion, you better hope the BYU picks up another couple of losses, because I just don't see how you can take a one, depending on how a title game goes, even sometimes a two-loss BYU team getting in over a Utah team. I think that the head-to-head should and does matter. I think the committee is telling us that much right now, but there's still a month of football left. and there's still a Big 12 title game to be had. And both of those teams still have an opportunity to make it to that game. So, like you've said throughout much of the show, Spence, if we're into the second week of November and you're still excited about the possibilities for your college football team, well, you're not a Virginia Tech fan, and you should be happy.
Head-to-head simply has to matter. It sounds so silly that we have to say that out loud. And, we'll continue to follow these metrics that the College Football Playoff Committee themselves tells us they use. But we might as well just use ChatGPT to rank football teams if we're not going to focus on actual games. That's what it is all about, the actual games. Head-to-head, it simply has to matter. I can't believe we're saying this out loud, but there's no other way around it.
Isn't there an old saying, that's why we play the games?
Exactly.
Right? And this is where, for me, the expanded playoff, there's no argument against it. Expand it more, right? There's a lot of people who are like, oh, well, now we're arguing over the best 4 teams. The other ones don't really matter. Well, yeah, but UCF didn't get a chance back in the day. Mm-hmm. Utah went 13-0 and stomped Alabama and didn't get a chance to have their name in the ring. Boise State went through the entire country, stomped Oklahoma, didn't have a chance. So just the fact that South Florida, Utah, Vanderbilt, I know they're an SEC school, but these names are being talked about, and it's November, and we're talking about a college football playoff. Not only is it deserved just for their resume this season, Spence, it's deserved for the years and years that they were pushed to the side for the big name in TV products in college football.
So Ohio State won, no surprise. There was some conversation about whether or not A&M would jump Indiana. They did not. Indiana 2, A&M 3, Bama 4, Georgia 5. The one mild surprise, Ole Miss beat the Citadel 49-0, so I guess there was not a lot of competition there. But Texas Tech did jump Ole Miss, so there's your mild surprise after they dismantled BYU. Other than that, kind of status quo. When you look at the teams that BYU fell behind, all moved up one spot because, of course, Oklahoma moves up one spot. Texas, Notre Dame, Oregon moves up one spot. Tech moves up 2. BYU is the biggest faller this week, down to 5. And Utah stands pat at number 13. Now, don't go anywhere because the Kyle Whittingham Coaches Show comes your way coming up on the other side. Of course, they're going to break this thing down. But, Porter, before we get out of here, what comes our way on a Wednesday edition of the show?
On a Wednesday edition of The Drive, we're going to talk a lot of college football. Josh Furlong stops by the program, our AP Top 25 voter. Gordon Modson stops by the show out of the Salt Lake Tribune. We'll talk some hoops with our guy Talk Hoops, Zach Harper, and then we'll go from there. Probably a college football playoff guest to join us as well.
Got a little Jazz basketball tonight. The Pacers are in town, sans Tyrese Halliburton. They are a bad team, and that's by design. They're 1-9. The Jazz aren't good either. So there you go. There's me selling you on watching the Jazz game tonight. BYU is in action. If you want to watch a little AJ DeBonta, we've got some Utah women's hoops for you. UVU will take on the Utah women after the Coach Witt Coaches Show. Special thank you today to Bill Riley, Craig Bolerjack, Andy Larson, and Lindsey Rhodes, our friends from Fierce Fighting Championships as well. Go to fiercefightingchampionships.com. If you miss any of the sound from the show today, you can go to the website, which is ESPN700sports.com. Download our mobile app and take us on the go. ESPN 700 app is available in the App Store and the Google Play Store for free. And then finally, for what we do in our space every afternoon, you can listen to whatever part of it you want to on your time by becoming a follower and a subscriber to our podcast. It's called The Drive with Spence Checketts. It's available wherever you get your shows. So subscribe, rate, review, say nice things in the comments, and give us all the stars. For Porter, I'm Spence saying goodnight. Coach Witt coming up on the other side on your home of the Utes right here, ESPN 700.